call to order the July 25th meeting of the Cary Town Council. You'll notice there's one less person up here this evening. Jack Smith is not with us this night. He's traveling with his family, and he shares that he will be following along with us tonight and watching the video and reading all the written comments. So for the start of the meeting, I'd like to call on Councilmember Bonsall for our ceremonial opening.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to recognize my daughter, Anya Lunani. She's in the audience today with few students who are taking Cary 101 class. And thank you all for being here. Please join me now in Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First order of business is to adopt the agenda. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously, which takes us to recognitions, reports, and presentations. And Ms. Bonsall already started this one, so I'm going to continue on that we have a lot of participants here from the pilot program of Cary Public Service Academy. These teens are active members of Cary 101, and this week's program provided a behind-the-scenes look at Cary's culture, the departments, the operations aimed at enhancing their involvement in local government. And I want to thank the teens for being here and being interested in our government and our community, and for joining us tonight. And if you would, please stand so we can thank you. So 20 years from now, when they're talking about this class, you can say, I was in the inaugural class. All right, we'll now turn to Sean Stegall for our town manager update. Mr. Stegall.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm pleased to report that while much work has already happened with our Walnut Street Road Diet project, everything from a new in-ground pedestrian warning lights to utility repair work, beginning the week of August 5th, a section of Walnut Street from Byram Street to Tanglewood Drive will be restriped to allow for one lane in each direction, a center turn lane, and separated bike lanes in each direction. This work will be completed prior to the start of the traditional school year, and once completed, staff will assess and evaluate the work while continuing to plan for future utility upgrades in the corridor, as well as more permanent road diet features as originally planned. Staff continues to coordinate work plans with a group of concerned citizens in the area, has reviewed the plans with our transportation working group, as well as coordination with NCDOT for nearby signal upgrades. More information about the entire project is available on our website. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stegall. We now move to the third item on the agenda. That's Public Speaks Out. We've included instructions for speaking at this forum online and on the printed agenda. There were 3 opportunities to participate in Public Speaks Out through written comments, calling in, or attending here in person tonight. And if you are here in person and would like to speak, I'd ask that you take a seat in the rows to my right that are highlighted. Public Speaks Out speakers have 3 minutes each for their comments, and speakers may speak on any topic as long as it's not a public hearing, and that's to your advantage because you get more time at a public hearing. The 3-minute time limit will be enforced, not to be rude, but to be fair to all of our speakers. There's a timer on the podium. It'll start off with a green light. When there's 30 seconds remaining, it'll turn yellow. And when your time is expired, it'll flash red. And once again, that's time I'm going to interrupt you, not to be mean, but trying to be fair to all of our speakers. I thank everyone in the audience for understanding that this is a business meeting. Please be respectful in your comments. Do not applaud, make remarks from your seats, or anything else that may distract from the meeting. So now's the time for Public Speaks Out. And first, I'll call on the clerk to read any written comments and call on any registered speakers.
We had 3 written comments and 3 registered speakers. Mary Collins expressed concerns over the Nancy Jones house and suggested potential uses for the property. Lindsay Robinson shares an issue they've observed of non-residents using false addresses to register for classes at the Cary Art Center. They urged the center to address this long program, and this case has been forwarded to staff. An anonymous individual submitted comments, criticized council for raising taxes and using taxpayer money in ways that do not benefit everybody, suggested that taxes could be lower if used fairly across the community. Our first registered speaker is Michael Rubies.
Could you move to your left, please? Thank you.
Sure, of course. Do I start or do you start?
No, you can go anytime.
Thank you. Well, good evening. I am Michael Rubis, and I'm a member of the Executive Board of the Friends of the Page Walker, Cary's Historical Society. At the July Historic Preservation Commission meeting, the commissioners, members of the Friends Board, and town manager Sean Stiegel discussed the recent historic preservation budget change to the 2025 budget. As a result, the Friends Board approved this resolution in support of keeping the Nancy Jones House in its current location. Whereas the Nancy Jones House is the oldest known residential structure in Cary, and whereas the Nancy Jones House has been designated a Town of Cary local historic landmark, the most significant local designation for historic properties, and whereas the Nancy Jones House is individually listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and whereas the Town of Cary acquired the Nancy Jones House in 2019, and whereas the Town of Cary relocated the Nancy Jones House in 2021 to ensure its preservation, and whereas the relocation site for the Nancy Jones House was chosen to ensure that its listing on the National Register of Historic Places would be maintained, as well as the house's historic connection as an important 19th century stagecoach stop along Chapel Hill Road. And whereas the Town of Cary received final confirmation in 2022 that the Nancy Jones House would maintain its National Register of Historic Places designation at the relocated site. And whereas the Nancy Jones House has seen many improvements at the relocation site, including a new foundation and footings, brick shouldering to stabilize the chimney, a larger crawl space with moisture bearer, louvers to improve air circulation and decrease interior moisture, a recreated front porch to reflect an appropriate historic style, and restoration of interior fireplaces and hearths. Whereas the Friends of the Page Walker believe that the Nancy Jones House could serve one or more of numerous possible uses to benefit the Cary community and enhance the public good, and whereas the moving of the Nancy Jones House to another site could jeopardize its National Register of Historic Places designation, risk damage to the structure resulting from a second move, require a certificate of appropriateness to be issued by the Historic Preservation Commission, negate some of the improvements that have already been made to the house, and delay the time at which the house could begin to benefit the Cary community, enhance the public good. Now therefore be it resolved that the Friends of the Page Walker resolve and proclaim that the Nancy Jones House should remain at its current location, that one or more appropriate uses for the Nancy Jones House to benefit the Cary community and enhance the public good be established, and that the restoration and renovation work of the Nancy Jones House to facilitate such uses be fully funded and commence without delay. So proclaim this day, 25 July 2024. Thank you for your time and continued interest in the preservation of Cary's history and historic structures.
Thank you.
Our next registered speaker is Adele Todd. I'll move on to our next registered speaker,
Okay.
John Petty.
Anytime. Hi, my name's John Petty, and thank you for this time to talk about the lack of a standard wooded buffer between my property, which is my home, and the commercial property, which is part of the Brickyard development. This sheet shows my front yard. The pavement was dug up and much of it buried so the grass cannot be grown. It shows the abandoned pavement, which is increasingly an eyesore. The next sheet is a picture from the northwest end of my property from 2012. On the left, you can see where my grandmother's house was. The trees that were in her yard would have been good for a wooded buffer if they had not been cut down. Her father's, my great-grandfather's log cabin was behind where the pool is now. The picture also shows how neatly I kept the land. I'm asking the town of Cary to require Meritage to seek the removal of the Duke Highway easement on my property and the restoration of the road right-of-way to a natural condition. Remove pavement, scrape base layer, place topsoil and seed, or payment of the equivalent cost, and also to add the missing buffer. The next page is the original McAdams drawing for Lennar. I have drawn in the location where a standard wooded buffer could be located. Worksheet 2 of the Lennar presentation asks, does the plan adequately protect other property or residential uses located on the same property from the potential adverse effects of the proposed development? Within the applicant's statement, it states, the property is appropriately buffered and the developer submits that the proposed plan adequately protects other property and residential uses on the subject property from the potential adverse effects of proposed development. However, there is no buffer between Brickyard commercial area and my property. If the section of Petty Farm Road had not been closed, a buffer would not be needed. However, the section of road has somehow been closed. There is a legal process to close a section of road in North Carolina. It includes a public hearing. This did not happen. The next sheet is a copy of an email where I was asking about a meeting concerning my road. Cary, the NCDOT, and Meritage were represented. I was not invited. It states the right-of-way abandonment has to go through a process with the town and NCDOT before it can be completed. This is a multi-month process that will go before Cary Town Council and the state's Transportation Board for consideration. However, none of this happened. I didn't get my chance to legally object. I'm told you all need to discuss these issues and come to some sort of resolution. However, I've never put my property up for sale. I'm not part of this. The next sheet is a right-of-way agreement. It shows that the land was not sold. I was not allowed to a meeting to discuss the disposition of my own property. The next sheet is a police report. It documents one of the times that I called the police. I looked out my front window and saw the men putting up signs to permanently close. And I guess my time's up.
Do you have your comments in writing? If you could leave them with the clerk, if they're not included in here, then she can make sure we get a copy. Or you can send them in later. It doesn't have to be tonight.
That's fine.
But I would like to read your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for your time.
No additional registered speakers.
If you are here in the audience and would like to speak at Public Speaks Out, that is not a public hearing, now's your opportunity. Anyone to speak at Public Speaks Out? Seeing no one, we'll close Public Speaks Out, and we'll move to the consent agenda. If you're following along, that's item 4. For the benefit of people watching our meeting on TV or some other streaming device, I'll take a moment to review our consent agenda items. Please keep in mind, one vote approves all of these items. On the consent agenda, we have Policy Statement 187, Hometown Spirit Award Group Structure. Opioid litigation proposed settlement with Kroger. Bid award for 2024 sewer rehabilitation project. Bid award for Harrison elevated water tank coating improvements. Calling for a public hearing for 23A04 Courtyards at White Oak and 22A01 Augusta at 4000 Green Level West Road. Would council members like any of these items pulled for discussion? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
There's a motion, is there?
Second.
And the second, discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And that takes us to public hearings. Please keep in mind that the same rules for public hearing are from Public Speaks Out with one exception. Speakers now have 5 minutes each for their comments. Our first public hearing is 22 REZ 19 Holt PDD. Principal Planner Aaron Puckett will introduce the item. Council will not take action this evening on this rezoning, but it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation, and the item will return to council for a vote at a future meeting, likely in several months. Ms. Puckett.
Thank you, and good evening, Council. This is a request to rezone approximately 48 acres located at 8200 and 8400 Regency Parkway, south of US 1. The site is an assemblage of 2 parcels with access solely to Regency Parkway. There are office uses to the east and south, a cell tower to the west, and Coca-Booth Amphitheater is also located across Regency Parkway to the south. The Renaissance at Regency neighborhoods are located approximately a quarter mile to the southwest, and the recently constructed Shelburne Senior Living Apartments are located less than a quarter mile to the southeast. For additional context, a rezoning request was also recently filed on a parcel to the southwest of this site for a multifamily development with up to 245 units. That request is in early stages of review and has not yet been scheduled for public hearing. Cary's GIS indicates stream buffers and flood hazard areas along the northeastern side of the assemblage. Field determination of such features is required at time of development plan review. This is a view of Regency Parkway with the site on the right. There are no overhead utility lines along the site's frontage. Regency Parkway is an existing 4-lane collector on Cary's future roadway widths map. The Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan proposes 2 sections of greenway within the site. The Swift Creek Greenway corridor extends across the northeast portion of the parcel, ultimately connecting to Regency Parkway on the southeastern end of the site. The Swift Creek Greenway connector is proposed to extend across the western portion of the site and connect to Regency Parkway. A future pedestrian bridge across US 1 is also shown on the plan. The site is currently split zoned with approximately 31 acres zoned residential 40 and 17 acres zoned general commercial. And the applicant proposes to rezone the site to Planned Development District Major. The applicant proposes the following development standards. The proposed uses include up to 750 multifamily dwelling units, a 150-room hotel, 60,000 square feet of office uses, or an additional 120-room hotel in lieu of the office space, and up to 25,000 square feet of commercial uses. The PDD proposes a height of up to 75 feet for all buildings, a minimum of 3% of parking spaces for EV charging, or 30 spaces, whichever is greater. Green stormwater infrastructure, or GSI, for at least 10% of required stormwater management. A minimum of 38 affordable units, or about 5% of the maximum total. This would include 23 units affordable to those at 80% or less of area median income, and 15 units for those at 60% or less of area median income for a period of 30 years. And a minimum of 5,000 square feet of community gathering space in each development pod, in addition to some larger gathering and open spaces that I'll discuss in a moment. The applicant has provided a PDD master plan to illustrate where uses and other site improvements will be located. Pod MF1, or Multifamily 1, is limited to a maximum of 375 multifamily units, and MF2 is limited to 500 units. However, the total between the 2 pods may not exceed 750 units. MF2 will also have at least 50% of its parking in a structure. Pod CO1, or Commercial Office 1, may develop with a 150-room hotel and up to 25,000 square feet of commercial space, with a number of uses permitted, such as assembly uses, retail, banks, offices, restaurants, and others. No commercial minimum is offered. The pod also includes a 1-acre gathering space in the form of a natural turf lawn. Pod CO2 may develop with up to 60,000 square feet of office or a 120-room hotel. No minimum office square footage is offered, so it is possible that both Pod CO1 and 2 could develop solely with hotels. A phasing condition included in the PDD notes that at least one certificate of compliance in one of the commercial and office pods will be obtained prior to full residential build-out. The PDD also proposes to meet LDO requirements for the 100-foot highway corridor buffer and the 30-foot streetscape along Regency Parkway. The northeastern portion of the site within stream buffers and floodplains is proposed to remain undeveloped open space as shown in this green area, except as needed for greenway or vehicular connections, subject to all necessary approvals. A large overhead utility easement runs through the site, roughly parallel to US 1, as shown in the blue dashed lines here. There is a narrow strip of property separated from the rest of the site that the PDD proposes to retain as a passive gathering area with a pollinator garden. The PDD also commits to construction of most of the planned greenway through the site, shown in the bold red dashed line, with the southeastern portion provided as an easement for future construction by Cary. The applicant has also noted they will provide an easement for the future pedestrian bridge on the northern side of the site and for future extension of a greenway connection to the east. A 15-foot wide bicycle and pedestrian path is proposed along the site's frontage on Regency Parkway, and this is an increase to the otherwise required 5-foot wide sidewalk. A 12-foot wide street side trail is also provided within the site along portions of the internal street network. Finally, the applicant has committed to a crosswalk and off-site pedestrian connection through the Cary-owned property adjacent to Cocoa south of Regency Parkway, the specific location to be determined. The PDD also proposes to reduce street setbacks and eliminate the required streetscape along internal streets for non-residential uses. Both of these reductions will primarily impact internal transitions and views within the development, as the proposed reduction to street setbacks would not supersede the required 30-foot streetscape along Regency Parkway. Due to the complexity, scope, and the location of the request, many of the Imagine Cary Community Plan policies apply. Regarding the Live chapter, the provision of multifamily housing can generally increase housing choice. However, at this location, the size of the proposed development would tip the balance of housing stock in the immediate area to predominantly multifamily. This is important due to the related policy, which speaks to the greatest variety of housing, particularly housing other than single-unit detached, being most appropriate in mixed-use centers, such as destination centers. This location is outside of those designated centers. The proposal does offer 38 units, or approximately 5% of the maximum total, as affordable, 23 for those at 80% of area median income, and 15 for those at 60% of area median income. Smaller housing types can help support the work chapter policy regarding the needs of a diverse workforce, as can the provision of shopping and service uses. This proposal does add a smaller housing type to Cary's stock, but may remove opportunities for other complementary non-residential uses. Up to 25,000 square feet of shopping, restaurant, service, or other similar uses may be provided, but is not guaranteed with the PDD. With most of the developable site area reserved for residential uses, and some office space offered but no minimum guaranteed, the proposal may struggle to meet work policies regarding preservation of employment opportunities in office parks. The proposal does offer to construct much of the greenway through the site and provide a connection to the Cary property across the street adjacent to Cocoa, as well as a wider bike and pedestrian facility along the site's Regency Parkway frontage, thereby addressing the engaged chapter guidance regarding greenway facilities. Similarly, some of the multimodal improvements may help address move policies, but not all of the site access improvements have been committed to. A commitment to 2 traffic signals does help address the move chapter. However, staff notes that during heavily attended events at Cocoa, these improvements alone will likely not address the totality of traffic impacts. The traffic study completed for this rezoning recommended improvements at 6 intersections, including the 3 proposed site entrances along Regency Parkway. The applicant has committed to only partial improvements at these site entrances. However, the project does site access indicated here. The study also recommended a signal warrant analysis and installation when warranted, as well as other improvements at the Regency Parkway and Lifetime Fitness driveway intersection, and an extension of an existing turn lane at Tryon Road and Asheville Avenue to the northeast. The applicant has currently declined to offer these off-site improvements. The applicant has, however, offered a traffic signal at the southern intersection of Ederly Drive and Regency Parkway. This intersection was found to be the most impacted by this development in the traffic study. For additional context, the traffic study did incorporate traffic counts collected during one evening of the Chinese Lantern Festival. Staff note that this was important information to be included in the study, but also recognize that it does not fully account for traffic generated by larger events or different types of events at Cocoa Booth. The applicant proposes to provide green stormwater infrastructure, such as rain gardens or permeable pavers, for at least 10% of the required stormwater management, and a minimum of 3% of the parking spaces will have EV charging. These strategies can support the associated SERV chapter policies. The SHAPE chapter speaks to the strategic distribution of densest residential development in mixed-use centers such as destination centers and downtown. This site proposes a substantial multifamily development outside of these targeted areas. The proposal will have some amount of horizontal mixed use. No minimums are guaranteed for commercial or office uses, so the site could be developed solely for residential and hotel uses. The site may struggle to fully meet the transitions policy due to the location of the multifamily development, particularly where it fronts on Regency Parkway across from Cocoa Booth. It is not clear that the applicant has made material commitments to noise mitigation due to the low level of sound attenuation proposed. As shared in your staff report, staff research found that the committed sound transmission class of 25 provides only a low level of noise mitigation. No architectural, massing, or height transition conditions have been offered to help facilitate form transitions. Details of building size, materials, articulation, or roof forms, for example, could help better clarify the form or massing of buildings. The development would meet the highway corridor buffer and Regency Parkway streetscape requirements of the LDO, but would not provide the typically required internal streetscapes. Buffers, excess gathering space, and some amount of structured parking do at least partially speak to aesthetics and development quality. The Future Growth Framework designation of business and industrial parks supports office and industrial parks that are campus-like and well-landscaped with 1 to 5 story buildings. Supported uses include offices, hospitals, light industrial uses, research and development facilities, and incidental commercial uses, as well as parks and open space. This designation also indicates that new development should incorporate short blocks, street trees, supportive commercial and civic uses, and buildings fronting streets with parking to the side and rear. Additionally, housing may be incorporated in new development in these areas. We note that today's post-COVID market may not currently support the provision of large amounts of new professional office space, and therefore it may be unrealistic for future development in these areas to precisely follow the Future Growth Framework guidance regarding primary uses. However, this designation also supports a variety of complementary non-residential uses, such as research and development and incidental commercial uses. A development that is primarily residential does not appear to follow the guidance for these areas. The plan's guidance for such as landscaping, parking locations, and building height is not fully addressed. Excess gathering space does potentially meet the guidance for green space. In looking at all applicable policies and surrounding land use context, staff identified a number of key issues which were also shared in your staff report. These include consideration for the appropriate number of new residential units in this area. The market may not support large amounts of new office space. It is also not clear that this location is appropriate for 750 new multifamily units. The transportation impacts associated with both this site and a successful Cary event venue continues to be a key issue in considering this case. And similarly, traffic and noise associated with Cocoa Booth should be an ongoing consideration for future development in this area. The limited residential uses existing in the immediate area means that this development would tip the housing composition to primarily multifamily in an area that's not within a destination center or another mixed-use center. And finally, the proposed use and height, without specifics around massing or building appearance, could make transitions challenging. A neighborhood meeting was held in October of 2022, and 73 citizens attended. Questions and comments were largely around traffic, particularly how residential traffic from this site might interact with Cocoa Booth event traffic. Questions and concerns about site drainage, buffer requirements, and the height and appearance of buildings was also expressed. Since 2022, staff has received consistent feedback from citizens about this case, including dozens of calls, emails, and 311 inquiries during this time. Comments continue to focus largely on traffic concerns as well as the density and height of the development, and many questions were also received regarding case updates and the rezoning process in general. Staff mailed public hearing notification to property owners within 800 feet of the site, which exceeds the state and Cary's LDO requirements. This concludes my presentation. Glenda Topp, the applicant's representative, is here to speak, and then I'm available for your questions following the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Puckett.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Glenda Topp with Glenda S. Topp and Associates. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. We filed this case in July of 2022. We have been working diligently the past 2 years to be here this evening, and we greatly appreciate the opportunity to share our vision of this site with you this evening. I represent the applicant, Cypress Real Estate Advisors. Mr. Luke Klein, a principal and senior director, is here this evening. And our team also includes Travis Fluitt with Kimley Horn, Heather Musesso, and David Brown with Klein Design. I also want to acknowledge Erin Puckett for her presentation. It was very thorough, and I think she did a very good job going over our proposal. The Future Growth Framework map designates the subject property as business industrial. The approximately 48-acre parcel is strategically located adjacent to Regency Park and is one of the largest undeveloped sites for mixed-use development south of downtown Cary. As outlined in the Business Industrial Park category, this site is a wonderful infill opportunity site. Infill opportunities are recognized to include housing and commercial uses. There are no limits prescribed for the type and amount of housing. The appropriate zoning for this category is Planned Development District, which provides the opportunity for the mixture of uses such as hospitality, commercial, and office uses on the property. During the ensuing 40-plus years since the inception of Regency Park, there has been an evolutionary change in planning concepts, particularly in relationship to office parks. There is a demand for new 21st century developments that reflect evolving lifestyles and workplace environments. A mixture of land uses is encouraged, specifically incorporating housing and commercial uses. Based on information found in the Triangle Business Journal Space Survey, the current office vacancy rate for Class A office space available for lease as of March 31st, 2024 in the town of Cary is approximately 16%. In Regency Park, the vacancy rate for Class A office space for lease is approximately 31%. There is a lack of multifamily for rent development in Regency Park and in southwest Cary, west of Kilter Farm Road to State Road 1010. And I've given a handout to show that area. In a land area of approximately 2.8 square miles, we can identify only one market rate multifamily community along with 2 senior living facilities and 1 nursing home. The Cary Community Plan encourages a variety of types and housing choices. The availability of multifamily for rent housing at this location will support the locational needs of existing and new firms, and potential employers will view the presence of such units as a positive attribute for their workforce. This is similar to what the town has seen in the Weston PDD, where they have included multifamily communities in their development. The Holt PDD will create benefits for citizens, the town, and the surrounding area in the following ways. Land use provides an additional housing option, multifamily for rent, that is in short supply not only in the Regency Park area, but in the southwest portion of the town. Includes neighborhood scale commercial retail with a cap of 25,000 square feet. The small commercial node will provide services that are walkable to the existing Regency Park neighborhoods and will benefit existing residents and those visiting the amphitheater. Hotel and small-scale office uses are also allowed in the PDD. Pedestrian facilities provides approximately 2,200 linear feet of a 15-foot wide multi-purse sidewalk along Regency Parkway where no sidewalk currently exists. Off-site improvements include an additional crosswalk over Regency Parkway and the sidewalk through a Town of Cary parking lot to serve the amphitheater. We're also extending the Town of Cary Greenway through the property with approximately 3,200 linear feet of greenway, and there's also an extensive greenway program throughout our community. Open space. In addition to the 100-foot thoroughfare corridor buffer, the northern community gathering area of approximately 4 acres essentially doubles the protected land area adjacent to US 1. We also have an acre village green to complement the retail and the development as a whole. It's also important to note that the project proposes open space that far exceeds the town's standards. Over 40% of the site is in open space with no buildings or parking. Traffic improvements. A traffic signal will be installed on Regency Parkway at the main entrance to the PDD that is directly across from the main entrance to the amphitheater. Also, an additional traffic signal will be installed or a fee in lieu provided at the intersection of Regency Parkway and Netterley Drive. This signal is desired by the residents in Regency Park and will help with traffic during events for the amphitheater. It's also important to note that with the changes that we've made since the original submittal, the proposed land use mix supports an approximately 1/3 reduction in AM peak hour trips and a 25% reduction in PM peak hour trips versus, again, the original plan that we submitted. Municipal benefit. The proposed development will connect to existing town of Cary water and sewer systems, generating significant utility revenue for the town, as well as providing a very significant increase to Cary's ad valorem tax base. Affordable housing. As staff pointed out, the proposed multifamily rental units follows the town's suggested guidelines for affordable housing, and this will expand opportunities for residents to live in the municipality in which they may work. The Cary Community Plan states that in strategic and appropriate locations, emerging new development patterns such as greater intensity and a walkable mixed-use form is encouraged in order to provide existing and future residents additional choices for living, working, playing, and shopping. The proposed PDD is a classic infill site for a growing community of Cary's size and profile. The Holt PDD adds a housing choice to Regency Park and the southwest Cary area that is now predominantly single-family residential. The planned mix of uses will create the opportunity to reinvigorate the existing Regency Park community. The proposed PDD is designed to provide a live-work development that reflects evolving lifestyles and workplace environments. The Holt PDD is an excellent property to include mixed-use development to the Regency Park community, including much-needed multifamily housing. At 48 acres, the site provides generous open space and buffering for the proposed land uses and is compatible with adjoining properties. The neighborhood scale retail node provides services to nearby residents and office workers. There are natural buffers to the north and east, along with the extensive trail system through the property. The proposed PDD meets 4 key values of the Cary Community Plan. 1, encourages redevelopment and infill efforts. 2, fosters a prosperous economy and municipal fiscal health, protects nature and the environment, and lastly, provides top quality public facilities and infrastructure. Before I close, I also want to point out that we did hold 4 neighborhood meetings, the last one of which we invited the HOAs in Regency Park for this rezoning. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And there are other members of the team that are here tonight to help also.
Thank you, Ms. Todd. So now is the time for the public hearing, 22 REZ 19 Holt PDD. And first, I'll call on the clerk to read any written comments and call on any registered speakers.
We had 46 written comments and 3 registered speakers. 46 people submitted comments either in opposition to or with concerns regarding the proposed rezoning. Our first registered speaker is Stephen Palmer, followed by Lisa Bullock.
Move this up for a second, make sure everybody can hear me okay. Can you hear me good?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you so much. First of all, thank you very much. My name is Steve Palmer. I'm a resident in Regency Cottages, which is, we know is the residential neighborhood that's just next to, or not next to, but just down the street from the Holt rezoning. Before I start, I wanted to just say thank you all for what you do for our town. We love Cary. We love where we live. It's a fabulous place. So thank you for that. When this all came about, we kind of heard about it back in October 2022 when the first neighborhood meeting came about. And myself, and I have several neighborhood members here in the audience back here, just so you know they're here with us. We got together to try to understand what the change was. We realized change is going to occur. This happens everywhere. This is what's going on. But when we tried to digest it, I didn't understand what was going on. So I wanted to understand the whole PDD, how that process worked. So I started back in the Regency Park PDD that's been around for years. And it has evolved into a really wonderful area for all of us. And so I kind of used that as my background of, okay, this is where it's going. And then I looked at the information, and of course, the biggest things that came out from that was the density or the total volume that's going on. And I said, well, 750, is that normal? Is that abnormal? What's that deal with? So Erin's been very wonderful through everything, and she did a great job this evening as well. I said, give me some ideas of cases that I could look at that kind of similar. I know they're never going to be apples to apples. And I gleaned 4 things out of that. And first of all, 750, it's unprecedented. I don't think it's realistic, to be honest with you. Secondly, I look at the areas where the other PDDs were rezoned. And the infrastructure around there was already somewhat high residential built in. And you need to look at the roadways around there, and they seem to be more designed and developed to access more traffic that could come in from these newer multifamily units. And I think the 4th thing I gleaned out of this is that none of them have Cocoa Booth Amphitheater. And I know it's going to come up, and I need you to understand this because it's really passionate to me, because I think people underestimate what Cocoa Booth is and how many people go there. Do you realize 93 days out of the year, there's an event going on at Cocoa Booth Amphitheater? Now, it's not every day. It's not on the weekends and everything. But on a weekday, guess what time they open the gates? 5:30 to 6:30. Rush hour traffic, right? So then you start thinking about traffic. All right, yeah, great. All right. Today, it's not bad. It's not bad at all. And of course, COVID really hit everybody in the office space, so it didn't really help where we were. But when you think about, okay, we're going to add you're really talking about 1,000 cars, 1,000 vehicles. You talk about 750, maybe 95%, let's say when we get to that, if we get to that accurate occupancy rate, that's 1,000 vehicles. And you think about, yes, where's the flow going to be? We don't know who's going to be in these units. What time are they going to leave? Where are they going to go out? But when you really add this into today, you look at Regency Park, there's a good picture. It is not a straight line road, so that people have been there. It's got undulations. There are parts where you have hard to see over, especially where the access points are going to be into this new development. So again, there's a little bit of a safety concern there too for us. And I think we don't want to negatively really impact Cocoa Booth. That's the thing we don't want to have. We want people to come. We love having it there, and I think that's a phenomenal thing for everybody. A couple other things that came up, because I tell you what, Erin did a wonderful job, because she hit a lot of the points I was going to talk about. So I'm just going to repeat even what she said. But I think when we look at this, and I did deep dive into the Cary Community Plan, great document, very detailed. And I tried to look at that, and I said to myself, what does this really boil down to? So I looked through all the different policies, and I looked at the section under Live, and it's Policy 5. And it states in here, it says, development of sites located within or adjacent to existing residential neighborhoods should be context sensitive and be compatible with or transition to neighboring properties. This is where I think we have a little bit of an issue. This might be addressed via one of a number of project attributes, including housing type. Initially, there was, what's wrong with townhomes? I mean, I'm looking in my mind and saying, we really have a nice setup. I mean, Regency Cottages, where we live, we're in patio homes. We're probably the most residential dense there is in that whole area. And we're probably 1/4 of the number of units that are going to be in here. So it just wasn't making sense to me. And then when we talked about building mass, the thing that makes me kind of going is where is, you drive down the Parkway, please, if you haven't been there, drive down. On your right-hand side, you're going to see 100-foot building, 100-foot building, 75. You look at the rest of the Parkway, it's not the same. So from my perspective to you all, I left you a documentation package as well. I appreciate you look at it, and please critique it, challenge it. But this is how we feel, and I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer.
Our next registered speaker is Lisa Bullock, followed by D. Gabriel.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Bullock, and I also live in the Renaissance Cottages at Regency. My remarks are this. The office and commercial areas of Regency Park need revitalization. However, I ask that the town of Cary thoughtfully consider the long-term vision for Regency Park, including Coca-Booth Amphitheater, as it considers this proposed rezoning and development and how this Holt rezoning and the proposed filing for the 24 REZ 06 Regency multifamily might impact Regency Park. This rezoning includes a multifamily subdistrict. 750 units are proposed for this development, and there are also 245 units proposed on the adjacent parcel pursuant to that Regency multifamily 24 REZ 06. And this would bring almost 1,000 multifamily units to an area of just 31 acres. Under the Live Cary Community Plan, Policy 4 is to provide the greatest amount of housing options in mixed-use centers. I suggest that the greatest amount of housing options would be to develop MF2 as townhouses and MF1 as apartments. This would also mitigate the issue of extremely high density. This rezoning includes 2 commercial sub-office districts. CO1 and CO2 propose commercial space and possibly 2 hotels. If the landlord could indeed attract Class A office tenants, then medical office space would seem appropriate given the proximity to Wake Med and would be beneficial. But is the developer confident they can lease the space constructed? A recent article in the Triangle Business Journal quoted the former owner of the office buildings at 9,000 and 11,000 Regency Parkway as stating that Regency Park is dying and office and vacancy in Regency Park as a whole is at an all-time high, and there has been considerable difficulty attracting office tenants. According to this article, vacancy rates for these buildings were 95% and 40%. And my understanding further from this article is that the owner and landlord of this building defaulted on their loans and had to give them back to the bank. As a side note, the former owner of 9,000 and 11,000 Regency Parkway is also the owner of that parcel which submitted the 24 REZ 06 multifamily. And finally, with respect to the hotel, 2 proposed hotels. My concern is to the type and quality of the hotels and the request for approval of 2. There is already 1 boarded-up vacant hotel in the Regency Park area. If the hotels constructed are budget hotels, they will likely bring high crime and drugs into the Regency Park area, and the location of these hotels is much closer to the residential and greenway trails, which will impact the safety of residents and those using the trail and the amphitheater. And once the zoning is approved on these hotels, the town of Cary will have no input as to the type of hotel constructed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I apologize, we do have 2 more speakers registered. D. Gabriel, and then our next speaker will be Patrick Murray.
Hello, my name's Dee Gabriel, and I've lived in Cary for 6 years, along with my husband, Cater Howard, who's been here since 1975, and I also live in the same neighborhood, Renaissance Cottages. The number of requested apartment units is ridiculously high, and it's inconsistent with the town's comprehensive plan. I just want to say that again, it's inconsistent with the town's comprehensive plan. This council has done a superb job in regulating development for a long time, but it should be cognizant that there's a rapidly growing disenchantment with the excessive densities of multiple projects that have recently been approved. I've lived in both the Atlanta areas and the Northern California areas, and I've seen the characters of those communities ruined by the proclivities of local governments to become a little too enamored with approving excessive densities. Please do not allow that to happen here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And our last registered speaker is Patrick Murray.
Good evening, Mayor and Honorable Council.
Could you move to your left? Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Sorry, I haven't done this in 18 years. My family's lived in the Regency communities for 25 years, so we count on Regency Parkway to get in and out of whatever we do. I'm not going to speak out against this. I actually think higher density is good. But I would like to suggest, if you don't mind, using this as an opportunity to address one of the issues that was raised about the engage problem in the plan. And it would solve a problem that all of us that live in that area have, and that is we feel like we're an island. We have no way to bike or walk to the destination center of Waverly. We have no way to get to McGregor, right? You probably saw some green dash lines on there about the pedestrian walkway over to McGregor. I would suggest working with the developer and see if we can accelerate getting that done. That would be a good thing for the developer, because now they've got 10 to 15-minute walk over to McGregor, and then maybe work on connecting that or finishing that Greenway connector over to Waverly, which opens up our ability to get on Go Cary or the Go Triangle regional transport. That might help mitigate some of the traffic, because the only way we can get to McGregor or Waverly is by car. So I would suggest if you go forward with this in some fashion, use it as an opportunity to accelerate the installation of those Greenway connectors so we can connect more of Cary. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No additional registered speakers.
If you're here and would like to speak at this public hearing, now's your opportunity.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Travis Flewitt with Kimley Horn & Associates here on behalf of the applicant, also Town of Cary resident and frequenter of Cocoa Amphitheater. Just wanted to address some of the things you heard in the staff report and from the neighbors, and that you will read in the neighborhood comments, and that's about traffic. While I completely understand everyone's concern and the heightened concern given Cocoa Booth in this area, I've been doing traffic studies in the town of Cary for 20 years, many along Regency Parkway. I cannot tell you how many hours I've spent studying the intersection of Tryon and Regency Parkway and trying to get that to work. It's probably measured in days of my life at this point. But I will say in my 20 years of working in the town of Cary, I don't think there's a site we've done more traffic work on than on this site. We went through three iterations of the TAR. We, Kimley Horn, have performed multiple iterations of traffic analyses all on this site over the last 2 years. We have beaten this horse to death, resurrected it, and beaten it some more to give it the attention that it was needed. So I wanted to address just a couple of things, some of the improvements that were recommended in the TAR that were not included in our proposal. As y'all are very well aware, in the TAR, there are certain criteria that have to be met, certain guidelines they have to follow, and oftentimes improvements need to be recommended that are really not impacted by the development. In this case, the one on Tryon Road at Asheville Avenue is a commitment of the medical office building up there and is being driven by that medical office building. So when that medical office building, the phase 2 happens, those improvements will be done. Similarly, the traffic signal and turn lane extension at Lifetime Fitness is generated by Lifetime Fitness and is really not impacted by this development. The other two improvements are right turn lanes on Regency Parkway at the two side driveways, the easternmost two. We are not recommending those for two different reasons. You install traffic signals for two reasons. One is capacity, which is not an issue on Regency Parkway today. There are two westbound lanes on Regency Parkway. The outsidemost lane drops at the western end of this site, and because of that, it's not highly utilized. So the outside lane, if we do not build those right turn lanes, can serve as a de facto right turn lane. The other reason you build right turn lanes is so that through traffic does not have to slow down to avoid people making a right turn. In other words, it keeps travel speeds high on the roadway. I don't think that's what we want. People have mentioned safety in this area. We're installing multi-use path to enhance bicycle and pedestrian connectivity through here. We're installing crosswalks on Regency Parkway at the signal at our main entrance and committed to doing another one. High vehicular speeds, we do not need people going 45 miles an hour down Regency Parkway. So that is why we have not committed those right turn lanes. They will also take out that nice line of trees that you saw in Aaron's presentation. Those trees will be gone. So that's why we're not recommending those. Instead, we are focusing the improvements on things that are going to be better for this development and for the community as a whole. namely the multi-use path, expanding it from 5 feet to 15 feet to add a bike component and get bikes off the roadway. The traffic signal at the main entrance, which is going to help with Cocoa Booth traffic, getting people in and out of the parking lot on the south side of the roadway. And then the final signal at the southern end of Regency Parkway, which is really not being driven by this development. It's being driven by existing development and concerns from that existing development, namely site distance and access in and out of that part of the development. So with those improvements in place, the third iteration of the TAR, with all those improvements, all of the levels of service, even for special events, are B or C. So this development, from a traffic standpoint, is not going to negatively affect Cocoa Booth operations. So even with Lantern Fest traffic, we're getting levels of service B at these signals, which is pretty darn good. So this development is not going to significantly impact Cocoa Booth traffic. If anything, Cocoa Booth traffic is going to impact this. From everything we've talked to with staff, I was out on the roadway talking to traffic operators during special event traffic. If anything, this site is going to have to work around Cocoa Booth traffic. So that should not be a concern. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else to speak at this public hearing, please?
I apologize for being late. I had to pick up my grandson
You're fine.
unexpectedly. I want to talk about the gorgeous trees, and someone told me that's a state issue, that the town has no say over that, and I'm not sure if that's true or not. But I just want to comment, we had the privilege of moving here 20 years ago when my husband retired from the Army. So I've been driving the neighborhood, and I've had 5 young adult children drive it. And when you're going up Regency Parkway, and folks are driving a lot more than 45 miles an hour, and people are turning out of Lifetime to go left. I can't speak to a right turn lane, but it's getting absurd. Just when folks, we're going to die, and I fear one of my kids one of these days. I don't know if the town of Cary has any say over trees, but I wanted to come just to speak to what I've seen in 20 years. And when we moved here, we were in awe of how beautiful it was. I couldn't even believe we bought a house in Cambridge. I mean, the trees are so beautiful. So as time went by and like Atria was built, I had the misfortune of walking my dogs across the bridge in front of Symphony Lake that day when those big trees were going down. And I'm nervous, I'm sorry. But I have to tell you, I'm not like what my kids would call a tree hugger. They're quite mortified, actually, by their mother's environmental acumen, or whatever they call it. But watching those big trees go down was truly heart-wrenching. It really was. So then I thought, well, maybe they're going to leave some of the ones out front. And I don't know if the developer has to tell the town or anybody how many they're going to leave. And if they said they were leaving 5, I counted them tonight on the drive here. And I was going more than 45 at that point to get here. But the 5 that were left, they're horrible. They're a farce, and they're a terrible excuse. So I'm not sure what developers can tell you. But Cocoa Booth is gorgeous. I had the privilege of being friends with Eric Solomon, the group that I believe donated part of that property or all of it. And when you're there, it's so beautiful, but so is the other side of the street. And Cocoa Booth has to be like a real apple in the town of Cary's eye. I mean, we have wonderful performances there. We know about the traffic from the Chinese Lantern Festival, July 4th. My neighbor told me just today that an ambulance couldn't have got through her neighborhood if, she's older and she's worried because of the traffic that night, but people want to come see beautiful fireworks, and thank you, they're spectacular every year. But what's so concerning is that I'm worried that I don't know who the developer is, but when they come through there, I understand all the lumber was sold quite a while ago. Well, the reason that isn't obvious to those of us who live there is because the trees that remain are absolutely gorgeous. They're spectacular. But given what I've seen in Sherwood, the development that's part of our HOA, and Atria, I have no reason to believe that the big, beautiful row of evergreens and other trees are going to remain standing if any type of development goes in. And I was just hoping that because Cocoa Booth is such a beautiful venue that the town of Cary manages beautifully, that maybe the town could have some say in some of the really big, beautiful trees remaining that are across the road. Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny?
Her name was Adele Todd.
Ms. Todd, okay. Anyone else to speak at this public hearing? Anyone at all? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. I'll start by thanking those who spoke for speaking respectfully and speaking informatively on the topic. That really helps. There are times when people are very emotional and are not speaking based on facts, and that doesn't help the process. So I really appreciate you doing your homework and speaking informatively. This is the second step of the process. First step was a neighborhood meeting. You've had several of those. And the second is public hearing. Where it goes from here is to an advisory board of citizens. And what they'll do is they'll have a narrow focus on how does this fit the Cary Community Plan, and do we think council should approve it? And so they're going to take time and review this plan, and they'll make a recommendation to us. And then we'll get it based on that, based on citizen input, based on staff input, and we make our decision based on that. You have an opportunity to speak at every meeting. Tonight was a public hearing, but every meeting has a public speaks out. And so if you want to come back, if you felt like you didn't get to say what you needed to say tonight, you can come back at the next meeting and the one after that. This process takes several months, usually 4 or 5 months, and it's just ballpark. But usually it's not fast-paced, and usually controversial rezonings and rezonings that have issues take longer. So you have time, and we would love to have your feedback. Having said that, that's the process. I want to address the last speaker's questions about trees. You're correct in the state does have a lot of authority, but the town does have authority for buffers between unlike uses and streetscapes, and we have an ordinance called a champion tree ordinance. Is it 30 inches or 32 inches?
32 for hardwoods, yes.
32 hardwood, 32-inch hardwood, they have to mitigate that. In addition, Cary has an urban forester, and we're creating an urban forestry plan. The good news is Cary's canopy is 50% and growing, not shrinking. And so that's something we're proud of. Even if you're not seeing it, that's what the reality is, and we want to grow it even further. And if you have area on your property, we have events during the year where we will give you trees, not little stumps, but real trees to plant in your yard because we want to grow our canopy. So that's the tree question, and I'm sure staff can provide a lot more information than I did. And there's a place online where you can look that up as well. So the public hearing is an opportunity for citizens to give their feedback to the applicant and for council to give their feedback to the applicant. So I'm going to give my feedback to the applicant. And I love the speakers talking about Lifetime, and I go to Lifetime every day. So I know this area very well. So I can identify with everything you're saying. I can tell you how the traffic lights time for about 3 miles going this way or that way. Based on what time it is, I can tell you which way you should go. That's how much I go to that area. Anyway, I have a real issue with the density, and so I want to see how that works, and I'm having a hard time. The main thing, I used to do simulations for a living, a couple of years of my life, and a loop road is very hard to handle traffic, so I'm having a hard time with that. I'm also having a hard time with, I feel like we're missing an opportunity. Kokobu Theater is a jewel, and wouldn't it be nice to have restaurants and shops that would complement? We were talking about this earlier. Before the show, hey, let's go have dinner, and then we could walk over there. Hey, the traffic's too bad getting out of here. Let's go have a couple of drinks. Well, I'm not driving. And then somebody else take us out of there, Uber out of there, and come back and get the car tomorrow. But there's so much opportunity in that area, and I feel like we're missing it with just apartments. So I would hope the applicant would rethink that. I think that 750 feels too intense. I can't see that working. Maybe I'm wrong. I think 2 hotels is too much. I would like to see a better mix of uses, especially retail and restaurants. I definitely get the traffic issues. I do understand that office parks are going away, so you do have to have a mix of uses. I totally agree with that. I understand you need residential there, but I really like to see the retail there as well. So that's my feedback to the applicant, and I would open it up to my colleagues to add their feedback. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I agree with everything the mayor said, but I have a larger issue with this one, and that is, for me, I don't see a cohesiveness in this development. What we often get an opportunity to see is a developer's vision for what this can be. And I think the mayor spoke quite eloquently about the fact that there are not a lot of services that I think would be more apropos for Cocoa Booth. And I was struck also by the fact of having two hotels right next to each other. I am not, I just give you my honest feedback. I'm not supportive of two hotels right next to each other, right across from Cocoa Booth. I think that's a bad idea. I'm also very concerned with what the building heights look like, 75 feet. What does it look like in reference to the other buildings that are there? What is the trajectory and vision for this place? That was all missing from what we normally see in an applicant's idea of what they want to create here. It doesn't really show me in the applicant's description and justification. What is your vision for how you're going to use this office? Is the office, as one of the citizens said, is the office for the park and a medical facility? That would be great. Or is the office and commercial use to support the multifamily that's there? 750 is just, I agree with the citizen. For me, it just looks so dense. So those are my initial concerns. I'm also have a number of questions that I'd love to see more information about. Thank you to Mr. Murray who came. It is an island. It is an island, and if there were more areas that allowed people to get to places without having to get in a car, I think we should, and maybe this is something council has to do, look at what the support of getting a pedestrian bridge over 64 is going to look like. What does the access to Waverly look like? That will also significantly change basically the fabric of how transportation works in that area. And so I'd love to see, again, a more holistic view of what this can be. And I would love to see the two developers get together and work on it together. Don't bring us one development with 200 multifamily right next to, talking 1,000 units. I just think there's a way to do this better. And I'm not seeing the reality of that. And then one last thing that I was actually thinking of you in my head, so it may be on your list of things. But that natural buffer area, that's an opportunity for an amenity. That is a missed opportunity, something that beautiful, that natural resource buffer. You have no plan for that 11 acres. And so coming to us with a request for this much density without any vision or cohesiveness, no holistic plan, and then just leaving the buffer, I think it's a missed opportunity. So that's my feedback.
All right. Well, there's going to be a lot of consistency here, and I don't want to repeat, but I do think it's important that you hear consistency from the council members so you understand where we're going. I also had written down vision, so I know, we're thinking alike today. Really what I was hoping for was articulation of a sense of place, something that would really enhance and support or complement the Cocoa Booth Amphitheater, but also round out the whole community of Regency, providing amenities that make it easy to live there. I do think that the community is an island, and it's hard when you have an area that's largely supported by a highway, right? It's accessed by a highway. I know you do have the back and exit out, but still, there is a lot of isolation there. So Earlier in the week, when I was looking at the permitted uses for the commercial, it had uses in there such as veterinary practice and training school, things that don't really complement the Cocoa Booth Amphitheater. And so I would recommend that the applicants reconsider that list of potential commercial uses and really try to hone in on what would be beneficial for this community and for the Cocoa Booth Amphitheater. I do think that there's a real opportunity here to paint a picture of what this sense of place is going to be and how this community is going to operate. And I would recommend that you probably don't move forward until you have something like that to provide, because this is too large in scale and it's actually too important to the future of our community to go forward without something like that. I was having a hard time even placing what 1,000 units look like. And I took a minute to try to scroll back to 2008 when we approved the Bradford, which was heavily contested.
Yeah.
I think it was 350 units, but is that, do you remember what the number was?
Yeah, it was 350.
I think it was 350, and they were kind of matching the number of units across the street in Stone Creek. So I was trying to picture 31 acres with, well, is it 31 acres total with the two projects?
I think it's 48 total acres, with 11 of that acres is in the natural resource.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is if you count the one that has 245 units
Oh,
and the
yeah.
one that has 750, if you add those together, what the acreage is, but it's really hard for us to sit here and understand what that's going to look like. So that's another reason why those renderings are so helpful. And I would point to past examples. I mean, the Bradford gave us renderings. Stone Creek gave us renderings. Fenton, the South Hills. We're getting these images. It helps everybody understand kind of how does the movement work? How does this, what is this interplay between the commercial, the hotel, the commercial, or retail, whatever, and then the homes. So that's what I would really like to see. A couple other little things. I would mention, I agree completely about wanting to protect the trees and maximize the green space that we have. I would like to see what this vision is for this crossing. We've had a couple other projects come to us over the years where we were shown, oh, and we're going to have this connection over to this other area. I'm thinking particularly around the Morrisville Parkway extension, and it never came to fruition. And so we want to hold on to a little something more than just like it could happen someday. What does that mean? Is there any type of financial contribution that helps advance that or not? So, I mean, those are some of my initial thoughts. I do want us to be considerate overall of how do we make the Cocoa Booth Amphitheater experience even better by building this project. And I think it has tremendous opportunity. I'm actually pretty excited about what this could be.
Other comments?
I got quite a few questions as
Okay.
well. I'm not going to repeat, even though I'm prone to doing that. But I will say, I want to share that I met with the representatives for the applicant, excuse me, yesterday. So I had an opportunity to pepper them with questions, and they were very forthcoming and answered them all. But I came away from that meeting, and I hear my colleagues with a lot more experience talking about a sense of place or a vision, and in my, not quite as sophisticated way of saying it, this could easily be across the street from a Walmart, right? It's not. It's across from Cocoa Booth. So that's sort of what I was, in my head going, well, it could tie in. It could be, affiliated and supportive in a way that that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this to be the thing that people are going to be like, it's so awesome that they built this across from Cocoa Booth Amphitheater. I, too, would be taking an Uber, but I'd like my Uber to pick me up across the street. I know the applicant's representatives, they explain, there'll be places like that, and I think that's going to be a really good thing to have those things over there across the street so the Uber can come pick me up there. And I do want to also commend the applicant on the voluntary inclusion of affordable housing. We don't get a lot of applicants coming in, especially under 80% of AMI. So I wanted to just commend them on that, because that 60% or less, especially in that area, I think there's a big need for it. And it always makes me feel a lot better about a bit of an increase in density when I see that more inclusive approach of, people at different income levels. So I wanted to share that. And I've always got lots of questions. So I have a question about the 4 acres of gathering space the applicant was talking about in the wooded area. And I understand because they explained to me that there is an easement there for utility lines in that area. I want to understand and make sure that I get it. This gathering area, this 4 acres, would be several hundred feet from the highway, right? So there's a 100-foot buffer. And from the drawings, it looks like there's an additional 100 to 150 feet or more of highway. I'm going to guess, what do you call that? Somebody I'm sure has an acronym I'm not familiar with. That area of that wooded area of that, off the shoulder of the highway. Can you give me an idea of how far off the highway that 4-acre gathering space would be?
So I'm not specifically sure how wide the pavement is versus the US 1 right-of-way. I think we could guess based on the scale of this drawing that it's probably roughly 75 to 100 feet on the highway plus
the 100-foot buffer.
Yes, but of course we can't control anything in the right-of-way. It could be cleared, widened at any time.
Of course. Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate that. And that seems to me with trees, like a reasonable distance from the highway. I just wanted to make sure that my assumptions from the scale of the images was correct. And briefly, it was touched on, the noise from shows and concerts. I don't know exactly what my comment is here, but 93 shows a year, is that typical for events? So I'm going to assume about half of those are pretty loud.
Less than that.
Right?
Yeah, less than that, because you have the Chinese Lantern Festival.
Depends if you
for a
like the
lot of
noise.
That's not loud. So, to me, that's if you move across the street from Cocoa Booth Amphitheater, you should expect to get a free front row seat to some shows. So I don't have so much concern about that. I just wanted to make sure I was kind of, 93, it seems like a lot, but it doesn't at the same time. We need to use that facility more. Maybe
But see,
some,
if we had a great event, great venue
right across the
then
street.
maybe it would.
Oh, see, I see what you did there. I love that.
And if I could just clarify slightly, I did get some information from our Parks and Recs folks. I think it's, when you count the Chinese Lantern Festival, it's closer to 120 days of the year that there's something going on.
Okay.
Either a concert or the Lantern Festival, something like that.
Okay, because we've expanded that, right? That's like that's a month and a half now, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it starts right before Thanksgiving,
Right
it goes
before
to
January, mid-January. Okay, thank you.
Can we piggyback on the description of the 100-foot highway corridor buffer? Just remembering Cameron Pond, is that a mode buffer? Is that like a Duke Energy clear path buffer, or is it a treed buffer?
That is a treed buffer. So it is required to be supplemented to a type A standard. In this case, there is existing vegetation there, so they may not have to touch it at all, or they might have to plant some
I just wanted
supplements.
to answer your question about what does that look like for the potential for that gathering space?
Yeah, you're reading my mind. Also, I'd like to know, I want to clarify that the 3 traffic improvements that the applicant declined, I think I understood those to be 3 right-hand turn lanes, correct?
Yes, at the side entrances, the turn lanes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure they were one and the same. And the speed limit on Regency Parkway is?
All you can get.
And then,
The limit.
Oops, did I say that out loud?
I did not say the median mean, speed traveled. What is the speed limit currently?
35.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just wanted to share that when Ms. Bullock was speaking, really the apartments in one pod and the townhomes in the other was quite literally the very first thing I thought when I saw the 2 pods, which would be still a fair amount of density, but not quite what this is today. And I just, I do have some concerns about more hotels over there. I don't want to say, what the hell do I know about hotels? Not a whole lot. But I do two right across the street in lieu of someplace to frequent when you're going to and from events there. Just seems like an odd choice. And honestly, we could have additional businesses in that area, which I think would be lovely. So that's, I think, that's all of my questions, I believe. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. How about this end?
Mine is very brief. I had a question about the traffic study. I think I understood that traffic study was done including one night of the Chinese Lantern Festival. What is the attendance at one night of the Chinese Lantern Festival compared to a sold-out show at Cocoa Booth? And was a traffic study done in one of those instances?
So let me see. I'm not sure if I have the exact Chinese Lantern Festival attendance. I do know that our Parks and Rec folks told me that events at Cocoa Booth can range from less than 7,000 to up to 15,000, with that highest attended July 4th celebration. Let me see if I have additional detail on the Chinese Lantern specifically. That data for the traffic during the Chinese Lantern Festival was collected by the applicant initially as a supplemental document to our traffic study, and then that data was included in the revision to the traffic study, which was the most recent version included with your staff report.
I guess my comment is it seems like it might be useful to gather data about what a heavily attended event at Cocoa Booth would be like, and considering what mitigation might need to be done if you were adding 1,000 units to the area.
We can definitely look into that. I see the applicant's traffic engineers come down. He may have the exact numbers that were collected for that night, if that's what you were looking for.
I don't have the numbers.
I didn't necessarily need those, but I thought if you had them, I'd listen.
What I did want to answer was your question is why we looked at the Lantern Festival. When we had the first neighborhood meeting, we were talking about special events and that we don't typically study special events because they are so inconsistent and unpredictable as to attendance. But they brought up the Lantern Festival because it happens every night for 2 months. And we thought, oh yeah, we probably should look at the Lantern Festival. So that's why we looked at the Lantern Festival.
I have no idea what the attendance is, but I'm throwing out random numbers because I have no idea. But if it's 1,000 versus even if other shows are 5,000, that's a significant difference. If it's a 5-fold difference.
And I'm sure we can get that data for when we return.
And otherwise, I think the list that you provided about the areas of concern based on the Cary community plan, I don't really have any additional comments beyond that. It needs to meet the Cary community plan.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming today and sharing your thoughts and providing the written comments as well, because it gives us a little bit more insight into the challenges and issues around that area if this project actually is approved. So this information is very valuable, and thank you for the engagement. Secondly, I'm not going to repeat in the interest of time, but I do agree with everything that was said today. My concerns are also, in addition to what was mentioned, that I did not find any solid proof of like a playground or a community gathering space. The unit size, I would think that would be very small. So a community gathering space is definitely, required. Having 2 hotels next to each other would be, I don't know how will that look like, but then, it does not make sense to me either. Parking, I didn't see too much proof on, how many parking spots were there for this particular?
It will depend on the mix of uses. So for residential units, it's based on the number of bedrooms. We wouldn't have that full detail until time of development plan.
I see.
And then depending on if it's actually hotels or if there's any office, commercial, that is all parked at different rates. So we don't know this early.
Sure. So I think that'll be all from my side. Thank you.
I have just one more comment question. So first off, thanks very much to the applicant. I know you've been involved in this since 2022, and you're hearing some of this very direct feedback probably for the first time, because it's the first time that we've really been able to talk about it as well. And obviously, you had 4 meetings with the neighborhood where you got a lot of feedback and likely made some changes as well. And as Councilmember Bonzal said, your feedback and your input matter significantly. There, as you saw, there were many things that you all said that we reiterated. But I would like to make a suggestion to the applicant. I hope what you heard here you take to heart and potentially reconsider, as Councilmember Robinson said, going back to the drawing board and not spending a lot of time with our planning and zoning board process. Because if you make a lot of changes, it won't be the same thing that we saw. So if you take our feedback to heart, which I hope you do, we will see something hopefully very, very different. And that's also not fair to the process as well. So I just wanted to put it out there that maybe you would reconsider, maybe go back to the drawing board with some of the feedback you heard, whether it's townhomes, whether it's finding a different way to create a sense of place. I hope that you'll take that feedback and potentially meet with the other applicant with the 200 unit proposal, because I think maybe together you could come up with something really quite remarkable.
That's a good idea. I love that idea, especially since the applicant was forthcoming, and I was like, oh, what's this other, it's not even their project, and I was asking them a bunch of questions about that, but those two working in tandem, like that, there's that sense of place that my colleagues use the right terminology for, but I typically don't. But it would be, that would feel like a destination.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. That's exciting to me.
Yep. It's such a unique opportunity. We don't have any other area in Cary that has this jewel that could really make it so profoundly different. I think it's an opportunity lost if you don't look at it that way.
All right, I wanted one other comment, but it seems so sad to say after that, like you leave it on a climax. I didn't hear a lot of talk about how the parking would be laid out, and that's one consideration I have is you kind of look at that. How does the parking work with this, given that we have so many units proposed and whatnot? Exactly. So anyway, I didn't say that, but I wish we had left on Lori's comment. Wah, wah, wah.
I want to thank once again all those who came for this public hearing, and please feel free to contact us at any time. Erin Puckett will have the latest and greatest information, so if you want information, she's the one, not me, but I'll be glad to facilitate getting you the answers. But Erin will know, she'll be working with the applicant, and she's the liaison. And once again, I would invite you to any council meeting, so thank you all for being here. And this will go next to the Planning and Zoning Board, probably in a month or so.
At least, yes.
At least.
Every time you give a date, one of the staff members says, at least.
Our second public hearing is 23 REZ01 Alston Yards PDP.
She's a delight.
Assistant Development Director Rob Wilson, haven't seen Rob in a while, will introduce the item, and council will not take action on this rezoning, but it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board and returned to us at a future date. I'm going to wait just a couple of seconds. Mr. Wilson.
I'll try not to take it personally that so many people walked out right before.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, good evening, Council. I'm excited to share a proposed rezoning at a key intersection in the Alston area. The 46.3-acre Alston Yards site is located in the northwestern quadrant of the NC 55 O'Kelly Chapel Road intersection. It's located north of NC 540, with Parkside Town Commons to the east, the Amberton at Stonewater Apartments to the west, and the Hawthorne at Parkside Apartments to the south. The site currently consists of a collage of 5 different zoning districts, 2 overlay zoning districts, and it's also part of the Alston Activity Center concept plan. I believe this number of districts on a single site may be a record.
Yeah.
The applicants are proposing to rezone the site to mixed-use district, or MXD, which would have an accompanying preliminary development plan, or PDP. This site has a very interesting history. And to share that, I'm going to jump ahead and do part of our Cary Community Plan analysis now. As you can see here, I've outlined the site in yellow, and the portion of the site in brown is designated to be a destination center. The developer is under contract to purchase this portion of the site. Meanwhile, the northwestern portion of the site, which is shown in green, is owned by Cary and designated as park open space. A key part of this proposal is a comprehensive plan amendment that would change the designation of the town's portion of the site from park open space to destination center as shown here, if the rezoning were to be approved by council. So as part of the site's interesting history, I'm going to go back to 2002 when the council approved the adjacent Stonewater Plan Development District to the west of Alston Yards. At this time, in the PDD, the developer designated the northeastern part of the site, a 15-acre parcel in the northeast corner, as town park, and that's outlined here in pink. When one looks closer at the site's overall constraints, it becomes clear why the developer offered this land to the town. It's separated from the rest of Stonewater by a stream buffer, and the western part of this area is wetlands. Of this land given to the town in the pink triangle, only about 9 acres was developable. Without any site access to the north or east, it was just more cost efficient to give the land to the town and put the density and development elsewhere in the PDD. So this is how Cary acquired this 15-acre property. I'm now going to shift our focus to the land that's north and east of this Stonewater open space property. In 2003, Cary purchased a 44.8-acre tract located north of this property. This acquisition provided access to frontage along NC 55, and it even included the frontage where there would ultimately be a median break and a traffic signal in the future. So now let's fast forward 2 decades to the 2020s. By this time, we've had several developers look at the property in blue, which frames the northwest quadrant of the NC 55 O'Kelly Chapel Road intersection. But nobody has really seriously pursued development on it due to 3 primary issues. First, the site doesn't have good northern access, and it really needs to be able to get to what is now a 3-way signalized intersection at the median break on NC 55. Second, as indicated on Cary's GIS maps, the site has streams and jurisdictional features that bisect and fragment the southern portion of the site. Third, the northern part of the blue track is so narrow that it drops down to less than 200 feet in width. So the bottom line is that the northern half of the site is too narrow to support a street with buildings on one, much less 2 sides. Former Cary Economic Development Director Ted Boyd spoke with several developers who were interested in the site but just couldn't make it work. Along the way, he gained an understanding of all the challenges that I've shared. He also recognized that if this 4th quadrant of the NC 55 and O'Kelly Chapel Road intersection was going to develop per the community plan designation, a different approach would be needed. Specifically, if this site was going to be successful, it would require the use of some of the adjoining town land to the west. And in 2022, Ted was approached by the current applicant and developer who was interested in working together under such a scenario. The idea that emerged was that if Cary would be willing to swap the town land outlined here in pink with the developer, a north-south Main Street could be established on an axis that would provide enough space to footprint development on both sides of a street. This location would also provide appropriate spacing between this street and the signalized intersection on NC 55. The result is Cary's property would increase from 15.1 to 16.5 acres, and Alston Yards site would decrease from 31.2 to 29.8 acres. Although the town ends up with more land, a much smaller amount of the town's resulting land would be developable. In order to balance this difference, the developer is proposing that approximately 40,000 square feet, or about 9/10 of an acre of land, would be conveyed to Cary on the Alston Yards site, and it would be a public park that runs along a portion of the proposed Main Street in the development. As part of the requested swap, the developer is proposing to pay for the cost of clearing, grading, and extending utilities to the public park site, and also provide funding for and construct park facilities. If the rezoning is approved, the requested land swap would come before council as a separate item as authorized by state law, and the details of potential funding would be provided at that time. So with this history and context in mind, let's take a big picture look at the combined site. Cary's Parks, Recreations, and Cultural Resources Master Plan identifies a significant north-south greenway that would run through the site, connecting an existing greenway to the south side of O'Kelly Chapel Road to the 45 acres of town land immediately to the north of Alston Yards. NC 55 is currently a 6-lane, median-divided thoroughfare in the Alston area. O'Kelly Chapel Road is envisioned to also be a 6-lane thoroughfare east of Stonecroft Lane, although it has not been fully built. The 2019 Shaping Cary's Tomorrow bonds include funding for widening O'Kelly Chapel Road, a project that's anticipated to get underway sometime between 2025 and 2029. There are currently no fixed-route transit services in the Alston Destination Center. The closest fixed-route service is currently just over 4 miles away at the intersection of NC 55 and High House Road. While there are no immediate plans for fixed-route transit in the vicinity of the property, the applicant has included a condition to provide accommodations for a transit stop along NC 55, with the location being determined at the time of development plan review. The applicant's proposing 3 points of access at both the northern and southern ends of the site, and also in the middle. For the northern point of access, the developer is proposing to construct a short street on the town's 44-acre parcel to the north in order to gain access and create the fourth leg of a full movement signal at the median break on 55. In addition to providing access to Alston Yards, this street would double as the entrance to any future development on this adjacent town property. In the middle of the site's frontage on NC 55, the PDP is proposing a right-in, right-out. The PDP also includes a commitment to install a dedicated northbound left turn lane in the median on NC 55, subject to NCDOT and Cary approval at the time of development plan review, and that would be a signalized movement. Finally, the PDP is also proposing a southern connection to O'Kelly Chapel Road, and the developers offered to provide a traffic signal at Alston Avenue and O'Kelly Chapel Road if approved by NCDOT. Let's talk about land uses. Given the length of the site, I'm going to break it into northern and southern parts. On the northern part of the site, there's a commitment to provide commercial uses on the ground floor of buildings 1 and 2, which is reflected by the red color for part of these buildings' footprints. In addition, residential multifamily is allowed on any floor. Building 3 has a commitment to include a minimum of 100 hotel rooms. Commercial, office, and residential uses are also allowed on any floor. Buildings 4 and 5 are commercial uses. These buildings will front on a community gathering space next to the middle entrance into the development. On the southern part of the site, there is a commitment to provide commercial uses on the ground floors of buildings 6A and 6B, which again is reflected by the red color for part of these buildings' footprints. Buildings 6A and 6B can also have office uses on any floor, and building 6A includes a commitment to have a minimum of 30,000 square feet of loft office. Building envelope 7 is more conceptual due to market uncertainty and could include more than one building. Allowed uses include commercial, office, residential, and hotel. Building 8 is also conceptual and could include one or more buildings. It can be a hotel or multifamily. And finally, as I mentioned earlier regarding the land swap, the PDP proposes to construct a public park that's linear in shape. The park would be about 9/10 of an acre in size and would have connections to the greenway running through the site, and it would be owned and maintained by Cary. In order to have the ability to adjust to market demand in our post-COVID environment, the applicant's requesting additional flexibility between land uses. So as you can tell in the table, the maximums have a range. And there's the potential for the overall site to have a maximum of 400,000 square feet of office, 1,120 dwelling units, 100,000 square feet of commercial, or 380 hotel rooms. The way this would work is that the applicant would have to provide supplemental traffic analysis during development plan review to be able to shift program from one land use to another. So to give you an example, the developer could do supplemental traffic analysis at development plan review to reduce the amount of office from 400,000 to 200,000 square feet, and then use that freed up traffic capacity to potentially increase the number of multifamily units up to 1,120 units, and the amount of commercial up to potentially 100,000 square feet. The PDP also includes customized street cross-sections. The primary street includes the ability to do angled parking that would count towards LDO parking requirements and have a 17-foot sidewalk zone. All of the proposed streets throughout the project include a 17-foot streetscape and setback from the back of curb, the idea being that there will always be a minimum of 7 feet for a street tree and a minimum of 10 feet of space for either a multi-use 10-foot multi-use path, or a 5-foot sidewalk and grass area. The PDP proposes to construct the north-south greenway envisioned by the Park and Rec Master Plan through the site, as well as provide connections to the public park and the proposed roundabout to the north. This would be approximately 1/2 mile of new greenway on the site. The idea of constructing a PED bike bridge across NC 55 has been raised as a way to potentially enhance pedestrian and bicycle mobility across this corridor and potentially provide an architectural feature at this gateway into Cary. While staff has explored this idea enough to realize there are 3 viable locations for such a bridge along Alston Yards' NC 55 frontage, there is no design or funding for construction of such a facility. The Alston Yards applicant is proposing to provide a landing pad along their site's frontage, along with a connection to their on-site greenway. The location of these features would be determined at development plan review. As far as parking is concerned, the applicant's proposing that 100% of the parking in pods 1 through 5 will be structured parking. The applicant's also proposing to have on-street angled and parallel parking in this area that would count towards fulfilling LDO parking requirements. The developer is also requesting an alternative standard to allow unmanned gates and parking decks for both residential and non-residential uses. There is no structural parking commitment for building 6A or 6B. A surface lot's indicated for these buildings, although they could be serviced by surface or structured parking at the northern end of pod 7. And regarding pods 7 and 8, the applicant is proposing that 60% of the parking in these pods would be structured. As far as building height, the 2 northern pods, 1 and 2, as well as pod 6A at the site's middle NC 55 entrance, are proposed to be up to 7 stories, and they're denoted here with yellow circles. Meanwhile, pods 3, 6B, 7, and 8, which are all shown here with purple circles, are proposed to be up to a maximum of 15 stories in height. Finally, pods 4 and 5, which are shown with white circles, are proposed to be a maximum of 3 stories. There is a small 20-foot by 20-foot cemetery known as the Barbie Hobson Family Cemetery located on the property within the boundary of proposed Building 1. Per a report prepared by a consultant in November of 23, the cemetery is typical of a rural family cemetery from the 19th and early 20th centuries. 6 grave markers mark the final resting spot of at least 7 individuals. The cemetery is not identified in federal, state, or county records and has been determined to not be eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. State law speaks very specifically to such situations, and this is a process the council encounters from time to time, most recently in 2020 and 2022. The applicant has followed legal requirements in terms of trying to identify and contact potential descendants. No responses have been received, so the developer is proposing to follow state law and relocate the remains to Wake Memorial Cemetery in Cary. If the council approves the rezoning request, then a separate staff report regarding the proposed relocation would subsequently be brought before the council for consideration. Alston Yards is also proposing a design guidebook as a condition of approval. The purpose of the guidebook is to ensure that the development's designed and constructed with an overall higher level of quality and caliber of design than would otherwise be required by Cary's existing architectural requirements. The guidebook specifically focuses on architecture, landscape design, and parks, greenways, and open spaces. Like Fenton's design guidebook, the pictures would be used to identify key concepts, and proposed development would be required to be substantially similar to these pictures at time of development plan review. Other zoning conditions include utilizing green infrastructure, providing affordable housing for 15 years, providing 40 EV charging stations, using LED or equivalent lighting for internal streets and parking decks, and providing recycling stations for each building envelope. The developer has expressed interest in forming a development agreement with Cary to help make the Alston Yards project more financially viable due to the significant amount of structured parking and street greenway infrastructure, while also providing additional improvements and benefits that Cary would not be provided by the rezoning alone. For example, additional greenway connections and additional O'Kelly Chapel Road frontage improvements could potentially be achieved. A development agreement would also provide a format to manage the implementation of the land swap and the construction of the proposed public park if the rezoning is approved. Cary staff has had preliminary discussions with the developer regarding such an agreement. If a draft agreement is developed, it will come to the council separately at a future date. The PDP proposes a total of 17 alternative standards that are detailed in your staff report. I've mentioned several of these as part of my presentation thus far. I would like to highlight a few more here. Regarding streetscapes and setbacks, the developer is proposing to grade and replant the streetscape buffers along the site's NC 55 and O'Kelly Chapel Road frontages. Flexibility is also being requested to reduce the streetscape to a minimum width of 10 feet, as long as the average required width of 30 feet is still met for the overall frontage. Flexibility is also requested to allow up to 8 feet of a Duke Energy underground power easement to overlap with the streetscape along NC 55, as long as a minimum of 10 feet of plantable area is retained outside of the easement. And the applicant's also requesting the ability to have a 0-foot setback and buffer along the site's northern property line. Two other alternative standards include the ability to remove 3 champion trees that are in the path of streets and allow up to 10-foot retaining walls in stormwater facilities. In exchange for this extra height in stormwater facilities, the developer is committing to limit retaining walls between development on NC 55 and O'Kelly Chapel Road that are visible from the streets to a maximum of 6 feet in height with a decorative appearance. In staff's preliminary analysis of the Imagine Cary Community Plan, we found policies in 6 different chapters apply. With regards to the Live chapter, the proposal could be viewed as providing more housing choices because it would add multifamily units to our existing housing inventory that would have the distinction of being located in a vertically integrated mixed-use setting. And the proposal seeks to provide affordable housing by committing to 5% of the units being offered at 80% AMI for 15 years. For the Work chapter, the proposal enhances locational appeal to businesses and workers by offering a mixed-use environment that's proposed to be developed to a higher level of quality through a design guidebook. It could also attract small businesses because it includes commercial space and a minimum of 30,000 square feet of loft office, and it could support the needs of new and expanding firms and provide employment opportunities in multiple sectors. Regarding the shop chapter, the proposal would provide a minimum of 40,000 square feet of commercial in a destination center and support a limited number of destination centers because it is in one. As far as the Engage chapter, the proposal supports a diverse and balanced park and open space system as Cary grows by retaining a minimum of 30% of the site as open space, while also including the construction of a new public park and includes over a half a mile of new greenways per the Park and Rec master plan. The proposal supports the Shape chapter by proposing intense development in a strategic location, a destination center, encouraging mixed-use development, supporting infill development by proposing to develop a site that's surrounded by development on 3 sides, and seeking to preserve Cary's attractive appearance and quality by committing to a higher level of quality and design with a design guidebook. The proposal also could be viewed as supporting the Move chapter as it utilizes customized street cross-sections, includes sidewalk zones along the main streets, and has sidewalk or multi-use trail on both sides of all streets. And finally, the PDP proposes to ensure a well-maintained transportation system by extending its northern entrance to the existing traffic signal in NC 55 and committing to providing a new traffic signal at Alston Avenue and O'Kelly Chapel Road. Notice of this public hearing was mailed to property owners within 800 feet of the subject site. This exceeds the state's and Cary's LDO requirements. The site's street frontages were also posted with blue public hearing signs. A neighborhood meeting was held in March of 2023 and was attended by approximately 30 citizens. Questions and comments focused on the amount of Cary land that would be developed and O'Kelly Chapel Road. Specifically, citizens were concerned about traffic impacts, when the road would be widened, and if there'd be a traffic signal at the intersection of Alston Avenue and O'Kelly Chapel. Since the neighborhood meeting, after we mailed out notices and posted the property, staff's received 1 phone call and no emails from citizens. The one caller wanted to better understand the land swap and make sure that Cary was not being taken advantage of. As discussed, the Alon Yards site has constraints. As a result, in order for destination center type of development to occur on this corner, a land swap will be needed. In addition, an amendment to the community plan will be needed. Therefore, the site cannot be developed in the proposed manner unless the town is a willing partner, both as an owner and as a regulator. Thus, if the proposed rezoning were to be approved by the council, there are a number of other important parts of the proposal that would subsequently be brought forward for council's consideration. This concludes staff's presentation. The applicant's representative, Toby Coleman, is here to address you this evening. Following Mr. Coleman's remarks and the public hearing, staff is available to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. Sean? Okay.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Toby Coleman. I'm here with Smith Anderson on behalf of the applicant, Heritage Capital Partners. With me tonight is our few of the key folks from Heritage, Ryan Blair, who you'll hear from in a little bit, Roger Edwards, and Will Harrington. I'll just say, I think Rob really hit everything and did a very comprehensive job. I want to give him kudos because this is, I know all y'all had to read this staff report, and it is complicated, I think, to say the least. And so there's a lot going on. I think it also signals something really important, which is this was not an easy site to even get into to even start with a vision on. And what you see here is the result of a lot of work between excellent town staff and a developer who's done really good work. And I think that what you see here is the result of that, which is a vision, right? There's a vision for a project. It's set out in detail, and it is really following a plan that that the town really started envisioning about 20 years ago with the Alston Area Plan. So, you know, as you all know, the Alston Area Plan was put into place about 20 years ago by this council, and the vision was for this to be a more urban gateway to RTP. And there's been a lot of great development over the last 25 years in Cary, out in West Cary. It's become really a fantastic part of the town. But one of the parts of the vision that really hasn't fully blossomed yet is that urban sort of core that the Alston area envisioned. This really takes the town's vision that's embodied in that old Alston area plan and tries and seeks to make it a reality. And it does it in a way that seeks to make it an engaging, walkable, and urban environment that's integrated with nature. You have a public park, you have a half-mile of walking trails, it's sensitive to all the stream buffers, and it provides for future development for the town's parkland to the north, which ultimately could become a pretty large park. Again, I want to keep my comments short, but we are available for questions. We really appreciate the time and are really excited about this project and really excited to hear council's thoughts about it. Thank you.
Mr. Stegall?
I just wanted to thank the developer and highlight a lot of the same comments. We're in the format where you're responding to a developer's application, but in this one, it's your staff that's also the co-applicant. And so we're as much them as they are us in this one. And so one thing that we thought that might be helpful, because it is so complicated, there are so many moving parts, and it's been worked on for so long, is that maybe parallel to the formal processes that we would have at one of our work sessions, have a work session with the council, so you don't have to put so much pressure on your comments right now, because it's just going to take time. We first previewed this with you at the council retreat, and doing it some now, but there are a lot of moving parts. We feel really great about the project. I think it accomplishes your goals, but want to make that recommendation to you that we also work on it at a work session.
Thank you, Mr. Stegall. Sounds like a good idea. Okay, now's the time for the public hearing for 23 RE01 Alston Yards PDP, and I'll call on the clerk for any written comments or registered speakers.
We had no written comments and one registered speaker, Ryan Blair.
Hello, and thank you for your time and consideration tonight. I'd also like to thank Rob Wilson and the Cary staff for a comprehensive 2 years of planning. We looked at a lot of details and how it not only would impact the citizens of Cary today, but the citizens of Cary that may live in this development. And so we appreciate the interaction and look forward to collaborating with Cary staff as time goes on. Our company mantra is to turn properties into destinations and deliver award-winning projects. And that's evident by the other developments that we've developed in the Triangle. Notwithstanding the comprehensive plan or the zoning, the easy button for us would be to develop a shopping center or a surface park garden apartment. But that's not what we're planning. We're planning a win-win-win for the community, for Cary, and for us. And Cary has shown its commitment to being forward-thinking over the last decade and longer, which has paid off and made Cary what it is today. This project is forward-thinking and is the next evolution in Cary's step. We've analyzed the extreme site challenges of the site, the lack of utilities nearby, the topography challenges, the site dimensions, and the required off-site improvements to make this destination what it needs to be. And our plan focuses on creating an urban, mixed-use development that is nestled in nature. There's over 30% of open space, and we envision a main street with walkable retail for families to walk and enjoy while seeing mature canopies in the background. And I ask myself, where else does this exist in Cary today? And better yet, where does this exist in the U.S.? And that is the opportunity that we have today to create something special. I'm going to depart with two final points. One is that our company is local. Our headquarters is in downtown Raleigh. We are not an out-of-town developer looking for a quick profit. We're here for the long term, and we're here to deliver this project and make it great. Secondly, I lived in Cary Park with my wife and kids. I have fond memories of just everything, walking to Andia's Ice Cream, using the Greenway trails, all of the high-quality architecture and buildings. It's evident that that put Cary at the top of the arc. And the question is, what are we going to do to keep Cary at the top of the arc? And we believe that we can deliver this and keep Cary at the top of the arc. And the last thing is that I think we can accomplish this objective together. It cannot be done alone. In order to develop a viably excellent development, it's going to take a balance of the following aspects. One, teamwork, collaboration, and assistance. Secondly is a focus on quality and placemaking. Third are environmental considerations. We're proposing GSI, we're proposing open space and heavy stormwater requirements. Third, affordable housing conditions. And lastly, financial viability. And we believe that our proposal balances all of those aspects to create a true great development that becomes something that is on paper and can be turned into reality. Thank you all for your time and consideration.
Thank you. No other registered speakers? If you're here this evening and would like to speak at this public hearing, now's your opportunity.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the Town Council. My name is Jacob Yakinovich. I live at 517 Stonecroft Lane, about 3,000 feet west of the proposed location within the Stonewater Plan Unit Development Area. I have had the honor and privilege to serve as the president of Stonewater Homeowners Association, comprising 580 home sites, approximately 2,300 residents of Cary for the past 13 years. Let me start off by saying this is an exciting time of development throughout the regional neighborhood of West Cary. Alston Yards will be a welcome development improvement alongside NC 55 and O'Kelly Chapel Road. This will help serve the overall demand of West Cary, especially considering the forthcoming development of Apple's campus, approximately 3,300 feet just to the east of Alston Yards. Though I admit I come before you tonight distressed to share an observation. I offer this observation in a blameless manner. My intent is in no way to frustrate the council or any other parties involved. When it comes to West Cary development and improvement, there appears to be a disconnect somewhere within the intentions of council, the Planning and Zoning Advisory Board, staff, the applicants, and the developers of our land. If I may, let me take you back, wind the clock back 9 years ago. I promise there's relevance to today's discussion. Just bear with me for just a few minutes. The Town Council that evening on January 28th, 2015, met to discuss the rezoning proposal of land across from Stonewater for a proposed elementary school known as 14 REZ 35, also known as E33. You might know this today as Hortons Creek Elementary School. That plan included a traffic study, 15 TAR 392. That traffic survey was done in 2015. It was 107 pages that details significant findings that all intersections on O'Kelly Chapel Road in and around this vicinity are in dire need of attention. All of them. Levels of service E or F during peak AM and PM periods of traffic. That night, I shared a series of concerns of traffic and other matters, and minutes of town council that evening do note there are several major intersections of O'Kelly Chapel Road that were identified as requiring improvement. There were also a dialogue among council members in attendance that specifically asking staff to challenge themselves and work with the applicants and developers involved to improve the traffic situation in the pedestrian crosswalk plan. The action was to send it to the Planning and Zoning Advisory Board. Plans did change between those meetings. It was with a single comment that was part of the construction of the school to make an improvement that would be made to a northbound turning lane at NC 55 and O'Kelly Chapel Road, almost a mile away from where the construction of the elementary school was going in. Out of all the intersections with traffic problems, we improved an intersection to a left turning lane in use by a minority of daily traffic volume in this area. No pedestrian crosswalk plans changed. When the Planning and Zoning Board met on the 16th of March 2015, again, I was there to present our concerns as Stonewater community to the board. The meeting dealt specifically with traffic, and an exclusive part of that rezoning approval, so I focused my comments around traffic. I distinctly recall one Planning and Zoning Board member saying that night at a meeting focusing on traffic concerns, I'm paraphrasing, give me some rope, it was 9 years ago, we need to pass this because we need schools. We should not let something like traffic issues get in the way of passing this. Your Honor, I left disappointed with the impression that our concerns raised across several public and private meetings effectively fell on deaf ears. And I raise this now to bring it into context because in those 9 years since, we in Stonewater have seen minimal to no improvements around this area that we're talking about tonight. Today, there's a single at-grade crosswalk through 4 lanes of traffic that often exceeds posted speed limits of 45 miles an hour. I feel like I'm playing real-life Frogger when I'm crossing that road. There are levels of service of grade E or F in both the AM and PM peak periods for the intersections of O'Kelly Chapel at Highway 55, Green Landing Drive, Alston Avenue, Strendle Drive, Parable Way, Green Level Church Road, Stonecroft Lane, and Claystone Lane. O'Kelly Chapel Road itself is a patchwork supporting 7 lanes of traffic volume at NC 55 and continuing west to bottlenecking of 2 lanes, then 6, then 4, then 5. 2 of those are dedicated turn lanes, and then 4 lanes again once you get to the elementary school. Where we would appreciate your help this evening is, as we progress the development of Alston Yards, that we do not have a repeat of history, that this council considers applying the necessary level of scrutiny to the process and ensure that the infrastructure, especially the roads and sidewalks surrounding the area of the proposed PDD, receive a commensurate level of overdue improvement and are in alignment with the intentions of this council. It'd be an honor to assist in any way possible. I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for all your efforts. We appreciate what you're doing to improve the regional neighborhood of West Cary. Thank you again.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak at this public hearing? Anyone at all? I'll close the public hearing. I'll get Rob back up here because I have a question or two. So Kelly Chapel Road, that's a state road, right?
Yes.
Russ?
That's right.
It is? And do we know of any plans by the state that's broke? Okay, Russ is going to bail you out.
This is one of your 2019 citizen-approved bond referendum projects.
When's that going to happen?
It was planned and is planned to start and go to construction between 2025 and 2029. And if this project's approved, it may be something that we partner with the developer to do quicker.
It is what?
It was a bond funded
is
project.
it?
So
You said this project.
Can you describe a little bit?
Yes, from Green Level Church Road to NC 55, widening to 6 lanes.
Oh.
What about pedestrian?
Another bond-funded project was the study of the grade-separated crossing at 55.
But then
which we
also
could-
sidewalks along O'Kelly Chapel.
And sidewalks and street-side trails would be included with the road widening project.
And there's like a weird stream buffer or something that's really kind of been stymieing us in getting that widened.
With the development across the street, I believe to the south, that they made us be an applicant to the project and wouldn't let the road be widened. So all of that would be taken care of with the bond-funded project.
So, Mr. Overton, who is the point of contact for further questions? I think we might have answered some, but I'm not sure if we answered them
If
all.
you'll get them to Rob.
Rob Wilson.
Yes, just as to keep it concise, and we'll all work with Rob and Scott and team to make sure we answer any questions.
Very good, thanks.
Sure.
And the other comments, I want to thank you, Mr. Wilson. I know you have a reputation of doing amazing things with Fenton's. The bar is kind of high for you, so don't disappoint us. No, I'm just teasing. I look forward to seeing what's coming forward, and I think a work session is perfect because
It's kind of like a mini Fenton.
yeah. And I mean, things like I saw a range of height in a building, like 4 stories to 15 stories. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
You know, why such a huge range there? Anyway, I just want to thank you, and I look forward to getting into further detail later.
Can we make some comments?
Sure,
and observations
absolutely,
now, or do you want us to hold
Nobody's-
till the work session?
It's totally up to you guys. Part of it is we might answer a lot of them later, and so, but if you want to share them now.
We share them now on
Yeah.
my thoughts.
Yeah.
So first of all, Toby, you used the exact word I was thinking, which was kudos. So kudos to Rob Wilson and to your team. I really appreciated seeing how a difficult site has been able to be planned for something exciting. So I'm really amazed by that, and I really appreciate your hard work on this. I do have some questions and concerns. When we did the Alston area plan, one of the things that we talked about was maximizing the views onto these buffers that run through Alston. And we really haven't seen that come to fruition for the projects that got built. But this is one opportunity with that buffer that runs from north to south. I would just encourage you not to plan like your dumpsters between the building and the views. It'd be really nice if we talked about in the Alston plan, if you pulled out the Alston plan, you would see renderings where the street actually is adjacent to the buffer instead of like the back of the building to the buffer. So I would love to see something like that happen here. I'm very interested in seeing what comes about on parcel 7. I don't know, when you do that design plan, which I think doing a design plan is a fantastic idea, I'd encourage you to articulate what wouldn't go there. So, because we've had a few instances where, for example, like next to the historic district, where there's now like a gas station, like the proposal was like, oh, it's going to be this beautiful thing, and then we're like, yeah, this is going to be so great, and then that beautiful thing didn't happen, so they put a gas station there, and we were like, oh, okay, we didn't realize that we didn't limit a gas station.
There will be a development agreement.
Yeah.
That will happen in.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that's articulated in there. And I'm not sure about this 10-foot buffer along 55. It'd be helpful for us to see what that's going to be like. When I heard that and I hear 15 stories, it makes me think of the Cap Trust building at North Hills Shopping Center that's right on the road and not very well, limited. You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we don't kind of like have that. I know it says average of 30 feet. I want to make sure that next to that really tall building, there would be more distance between the road and the building. So, and of course, I'm concerned about the retaining walls. And I just want to articulate again, it's for safety. It's not for aesthetics, it's for safety. So if you're going to do a 10-foot wall, put, a prickly shrub across the top so that no kids are playing up there. So that's it for my thoughts. But I just want to say it now because I'm not going to have these notes with me when we go to work session.
That's just helpful.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of questions and thoughts I'd like to share with you. I want to read what I said, or what I wrote. I wish we could just constantly hear projects where our staff is collaborating with developers, because boy, oh boy, this is much more pleasant. But Rob did an excellent job of making this land swap make sense.
Yeah.
You started out, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? And you went through, and I went, oh, okay, that makes perfect sense, which is nothing short of heroic, because I'm a little tired right now. So I wanted to share, really, that was perfect. Say it like that every time. And this is a great example of where you hire the best staff in the whole world, and you get these creative and innovative plans, from this undevelopable track and land swaps and everything. So that's just awesome. But I have a few questions. So I said the really nice stuff first, so I didn't glean over that at the end. What's a loft office?
That would be office. Think of along the main street at Fenton, where there's office above Coletta, above the retail. Those would be examples of loft office, as opposed to a freestanding office building where you have office on the ground floor and the upper floors.
Okay, so a lot of times when we say mixed use, we're really talking about first floor retail and loft office.
Yes.
Okay. Hey, I learned a new term today. The access road that you showed that, it'll be on Cary's land, but that's after the land swap, right?
I don't know if,
Well, I think the access road you're talking about would be through the land that Cary would continue to own, and that could be future parkland.
That would, okay, so that could also.
The acres to the north.
Serve as park access.
Yes, it would.
As well, okay, thank you. And the recycling stations, I'm curious, so this is an applicant coming to us that's potentially committing to having multifamily and/or rental with recycling?
that's the commitment, yes.
Hot dog, okay. I mean, I think that's fairly rare, is it not? Yeah, it's fairly rare, I know, and I don't know why, but I've seen the dumpsters in a lot of places. I don't know what I'm doing in dumpsters, but they're.
Dumpster diving, or us.
Here's what I think, I don't know why, I seem to have a lot of dumpster experience. And what you see in a lot of dumpsters is a ton of cardboard, right? So even, I always think to myself, even if, multifamily places would just put in a can and, cardboard recycling center, it could really reduce the amount of stuff going to the landfill. And as our dump is filling up, we all know that the dump space is at a premium. So this, especially something this large, committing to recycling, especially if it's also provided for the businesses in there, because bars and restaurants create a very significant amount of recyclable stuff that also goes into the landfill. So I just wanted to give that 2 thumbs up and say that's awesome. I would like to see the EV charging stations expressed in something that's commensurate to the number of units. So there's a very big difference between 525 units and 1,120, and 40, EV charging stations could be, wildly inadequate or just fine. So I think if it was, just rethought, put it in a commensurate term, and then, again, I wrote something else really nice in here about Rob. And then,
Rob, I need some notes.
yeah, I wrote it down and I showed it to Lori. And I'd like to see, us consider a more substantive affordable housing commitment here. Perhaps if the bond passes and we can put a little bit of skin in the game, I think this would be an area where we could do something to move the needle in that area. I think that this would be a good place for even more partnership than has already been demonstrated.
I'm not going to repeat anything that she said. I just want to, are there 2 hotel locations on this? Or did I misunderstand that?
No, that's correct.
So
There are actually 3 potential hotel locations. They've left a lot of flexibility to respond to the market. But there's a cap on the number of total rooms that could be provided on the site.
Everybody wants to come to Cary.
Well, as a reminder for the council, given the previous applicant and then this, is Cary's current hotel stock is very old and very dated. So that's why you're seeing a lot more demand for new hotels.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time, except tonight, when we've actually seen a rezoning that included multiple locations on a single rezoning for multiple hotels.
See, it makes sense to me, though, like in Crossroads,
In the
they're right
same
next door.
rezoning. 2
Yeah.
hotels.
Yeah.
Oh, the Marriott?
Vermont-Kalapi has 2 on his site, and on Harrison, that development is 2 hotels.
It's 2 on one location?
2 on
Okay.
one, yeah.
Then
Is that the new thing?
I didn't
That must be
realize
the
that.
new
I
thing.
guess.
I do think they share amenities,
Yeah.
so it's.
Yeah, it's just,
That would
it's
make
just
sense.
odd. So my comments, that I won't repeat any of hers. The first thing is, I have to say, this is what a cohesive vision looks like. I wish the previous applicant had stayed, and if they're watching it now, this is exactly hits the sweet spot for me for what a sense of place looks like. And if they had stayed, they would have seen, how the vision is created, which is very interesting. Yes, it's in a destination center, but it's actually smaller than the one that was previously before it, which was, 48 acres. So, and this one, of course, is denser and more complicated, but it has all the things that I was looking for personally. What I love about it is I do love the land swap, and I like the idea of a vertical park. My concern as we get get ready for a work session. This land has very interesting topography, not just the land itself, but what's next to it. And so I'd love to see, as we get into the work session, what does that topography look like? You know, is it going to be, you know, you're going to have all these hotels, and then you're going to have the Cary Park land that's in a hole or a valley? That would be fine, but I'd just like to know what it's going to feel like for the users of the park. I love that it has a lot of structured parking, especially as we move forward with our concerns environmentally. Personally, landing pad for the pedestrian bike bridge or whatever the delineated areas to allow people to utilize both sides of 55. And the 30% open space in something that is very dense. These are all the things that really, you know, appeal to me. What I have concerned with, not to repeat, but 40 EV charges for the entire site seems low. It's about 3.5% of 1,120 units. I also can't figure out, are the 40 EV chargers, like some of them for the hotel? Are some of them for the apartments? Are they for commercial?
There's a minimum commitment of 5 per pod, per building envelope.
5 per pod?
Yeah, there are 8 different pods, and
Okay.
there's a minimum
Okay.
commitment of 5, and that's how you get to the 40.
Okay, I'd love to see that higher. I think that what you see just from a market perspective is that the market definitely supports most, and I'd love to see it identified what that means per pod, right? Does that mean, okay, it's going to be 5 for the commercial, right? Because there's so much flexibility, which I totally appreciate the flexibility. If you're going to a hotel and you have an EV, you're going to look for, you know, an ability to charge up. The other one is, I appreciate, again, the recommendation for affordable housing for 5% of the units. I, of course, would love to see it closer to the last couple that we supported, or a couple of the last ones that we supported, which were closer to 10%. And the industry standard is 30-year commitment, not 15-year commitment. So I'd love to see that closer to the industry standard as well. And if I'm asking, I would also love to see more like 60% AMI as part of those units, and not just 80% AMI. So those are my comments.
Anything on this end?
I'm actually so excited right now. I love this partnership, and I feel this is going to be a great asset for Western Cary, District D. And I'm going to hold back on my comments and wait for more information, but then, or the working group session perhaps, to provide more feedback. But I'm so excited about this project. Thank you.
I'm fine waiting to the work session also.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Wilson. This will go to the Planning and Zoning Board. In parallel, we're going to have a work session.
Yeah, we'll work with the developer. We might want to be a little bit in front of that, but
So we'll probably
generally in parallel.
push the P and Z back a little.
Maybe a teeny.
Yeah. Okay, very good. Thank you. Before we move to our next public hearing, I've had a request for a brief recess. So let's take a 5-minute recess. You're welcome. We'll reconvene our council meeting at this time, and we're moving now to our third public hearing, 24 REZ01, which is 6200 and 6308 Holly Springs Road. Assistant Planning Director Katie Dry will introduce the item, and council will not take action on this item tonight. It will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board for their review and recommendation. Ms. Dry.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request to rezone 2.58 acres at 6200 and 6308 Holly Springs Road. The site is comprised of 2 parcels, each improved with detached residential dwellings. The properties are owned by Shepherd's Church, which also owns the detached dwelling and church to the north of the site. The Pipers Crossing townhouse neighborhood is located to the west and to the south. According to Cary's maps, there may be some stream buffers impacting the site, and field determination of those buffers would occur at the time of development plan review. Holly Springs Road is currently a 4-lane divided thoroughfare with sidewalk along the property's frontage. The Imagine Cary Community Plan's future roadway widths map identifies this area as a 6-lane thoroughfare with a landscape median along the property's frontage. The Go Cary Fixed Route 1 is approximately a quarter of a mile to the north of the site. And according to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan, there are no greenways, parks proposed within or adjacent to the site, and the Campbell Greenway corridor is about 0.1 miles east of the property. Presently, development of both parcels is limited to townhouses under the current zoning of transitional residential conditional use. The applicant is requesting to rezone to office and institutional conditional use and residential 40 conditional use. The proposed zoning conditions would limit the uses on the northern property to a maximum of 5,000 square feet of office use, and for the southern property, it would prohibit the use of indoor-outdoor kennels for the proposed R40 CU parcel. The R40 zoning district permits detached dwellings of lots of over 40,000 square feet or greater. It also allows certain uses such as government and civic uses, such as parks, religious assembly, and educational uses. There are also other uses that would be allowed with a special use permit process or use-specific standards. An analysis of this request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds that policies from the Live, Work, Shape, and Shape chapters apply most directly. A greater variety of housing supports the growth of a more diverse workforce, and the site's location near a major thoroughfare would support and enable easy access to major employment centers throughout the area. Finally, the proposed uses would provide an appropriate use transition to a variety of residential lot sizes and zoning districts that are nearby to the site. The Future Growth Framework map designates the site as being within a traditional neighborhood. These areas call for a moderate housing mix, and the proposed uses would serve as an appropriate transition. There was a neighborhood meeting on March 6th of this year. There were 6 citizens who participated. No questions or concerns were expressed, just a few questions about the proposal. Since the public hearing has been advertised, we've received no calls or emails regarding the public hearing. Public hearing notification was mailed to property owners within 800 feet of the subject site. This exceeds the town of Cary's LDO requirements, as well as state requirements for public hearing notices. The applicant's representative is here to share an overview of the request. Following that, in the public hearing, I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dry. Would the applicant care to come forward?
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Tom Johnson with the law firm of Williams Mullen at 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1700 in Raleigh, here on behalf of the applicant. And basically, the church bought both of these properties. They were within this townhome conditional use for the adjacent development that went in. They purchased them as the single-family lots. So we're rezoning to take it out of that townhome conditional use. there's a resident on the O&I piece that they're actually going to move to the other piece, so from 6200 to the 6308 piece. And the plan is at some point to use the O&I piece as support to the church, some office space for the church. Maybe a counseling center has been discussed, and that's what we're looking at. We're limiting it to 5,000 square feet because we didn't want to run the issues with traffic, and that was a kind of a point at which we could do that, and that's why that conditional use is there. But I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. So now's the time for the public hearing for 24 REZ01, and I'll call on our clerk for any written comments or any registered speakers.
No written comments and no registered speakers.
If you're here in the audience and would like to speak at this public hearing, now is your opportunity.
My name is Kristen Desimoni, and I live in Piper's Grove, which is on the opposite side of Holly Springs Road. So I just had a couple of questions. It sounds like it's going to be an office building, if I'm understanding that. And I'm wondering, traffic on Holly Springs Road is hideous at the moment. And I'm wondering if it's made into an office building, will they be putting a turning lane in there for a right-hand turning lane for people coming? Otherwise, it's going to back up toward Tryon Road, the traffic. And I wanted to know if there's going to be some type of buffer between that office building and the neighborhood behind that, which I'm on the other side of Holly Springs Road, but then there's, I think it's Piper's Landing is on that side. So, and I want to make sure that there will not eventually be a stoplight there. I mean, Holly Springs Road is so well-traveled as it is, that it's impossible for us. Coming out of, on the opposite side of Holly Springs Road, we're not allowed to take a left-hand turn. So we can only go right. And on the opposite side, the other Piper's Landing can go either left or right. So it looks like where that office building will be, they can only come out and go right. We do have some people who, who come out of the church and go up. There's a little, right before you take a left to go into our neighborhood, they always do U-turns in the morning, sometimes on Sundays, and sometimes at other times during the day, because the traffic just builds up on Holly Springs Road. So that's really where my concerns are, but it's really mainly putting in another lane if it's an office building, and making sure that they have limited, they said, so that means that there will be no dog or animal facilities there, which is good. But is there any other way for us to know what else could be going in there other than church? And I'm assuming that the church is going to continue to own it, that land, if I'm understanding that correctly. I'm sorry, I missed the first meeting because the paperwork got buried, but so I'm lacking some information. So I just want to know if the church is going to continue to own that property. It would be nice to know a little bit more about what's going to go there and what's going to go in there. Anyways, thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll get the answers to your questions in just a moment after the public hearing is closed. Anyone else to speak at this public hearing? Saying no one, I'll close the public hearing. The answer to your questions, Ms. Dry is your liaison, but I'll try to answer some of them because I probably live less than a half a mile from there, so I'm very familiar with that area. A 5,000 square foot office building is not going to generate a lot of traffic. You probably have the trip generation that a 5,000 square foot office building would generate, but it's not much at all. The Holly Springs Road is a DOT road. It's ultimately going to be, sadly, 6-lane median divided, I think the last I saw, and DOT has zero money for it, and we are not planning on widening it. So right now, there are no plans for Holly Springs Road to get any better. And in my neighborhood, I have to go through another neighborhood to get out. I cannot go out on Holly Springs Road. So I feel your pain. We can't use that entrance. We can only come in that entrance. So do you have the trip generation? And she's your contact for all your questions. She'll be forever and ever can answer all your questions until this is, till the end of time.
I'll address the other question that people often ask is,
who's going to own this. And so the zoning goes with the land, it doesn't go with the owner. So that's why we want to make sure we get the zoning right, because the church could sell it and the zoning would stay in place.
Yes, and if I could speak to the trip generation, it's very particular how we look at trip generation. We're looking at the peak hours, which is generally when you would see people driving to and from work. So generally between the hours of 7 to 9 in the morning and then 4 to 6 in the afternoon. And so that's when we're looking at how trips are generated. But for an office of this size, plus the single-family use, it would be 17 a.m. peak hour trips and 20 p.m. peak hour trips. So that's below the threshold. That would require a traffic study. But we would certainly be, evaluating the site at the time of development plan review to make sure all required road improvements are in place as well.
And I don't need a traffic study. For those of us that live there, we don't need a traffic study. So. But 17 is not going to be significant. So that was the key. But feel free to ask Ms. Dry any questions, and she can get you the answers. And thank you for being here this evening.
Can you clarify that 17 is per hour?
In the AM?
AM and PM.
So
During
So
the
it-
hours
the
of
whole-
7 to 9.
Rush hour.
Oh, so the whole time period,
During the
not
morning rush hour.
not just rush hour, but all morning long?
During the morning rush hour specifically.
So from 7 to 9
7 to
a.m.
9.
Okay, thank you.
So 8.5 cars.
An hour.
An hour.
An hour.
Okay. I just want to make sure I'm learning as I go.
Yeah.
Any other
That's a great question.
questions from council before we send this?
Well, I have a question. What does the access look like for those? Obviously, they have, not obviously, my guess is they currently have driveway access because they're two homes. Do those remain, or do they, or is the applicant offering to access that through the church lot? What did the access look like?
Yes, so there's no zoning conditions that have been offered at this time in regards to site access. When it comes to determining the site access, we would need to take a look at that at the time of development plan review. So we don't have a site layout yet for the office site. And then, of course, the R40 lot looks like it may remain potentially as is, just a single-family residence potentially. So we would need to take a look and probably work with the applicant on the circulation of their site, like where the parking would go, to determine where the access point would be as well. But no conditions have been offered
No
at this point.
conditions? Okay.
Ms. Dry, what's the buffer requirement between office and townhome?
So the interesting thing with this particular site is there is a street that's in between the site and the townhouses. I'll see if I can pull
there
it
it
up just to illustrate. See if I can find a good aerial. See if this, you can see that the townhouse street is directly behind the northern parcel, which is within the site, so it's adjacent to that. So we would need to evaluate what that buffer would be adjacent to the street. I can tell you that a 40-foot type A buffer would be required adjacent to the detached dwelling to the north as well as to the south. And then we would need to make an evaluation as to the streetscapes that are adjacent along the western property line, and then, of course, adjacent to Holly Springs Road.
Okay, so Newland Drive goes all the way up to that northern boundary
That's
that we see there, but it's only single loaded with townhomes. So would you imagine that whatever site plan came in for this office, it would have some type of driveway onto Newland?
Potentially.
Okay.
That's
Right.
hard to know, though, at this point in time.
Okay. Yeah, I think if I was living on Newland, I would want some type of condition provided that stipulates that a buffer would be planted, just to kind of soften that, since, it'd be office, even though it's small office, it'd be office against residential. So something.
And just to inform you, this is, the reasons we're not answering all the questions is this is a rezoning, which is type of use. So we're talking about type. Site plan is when they get into all the details like we're mentioning, and so that's why we're not discussing it, and that'll come later,
But they
if
can-
this passes.
They can put in conditions
They
about
can-
buffers.
That's right. They can
They
put in
wanted to.
conditions if they would like. Any other questions? So this will go to the Planning and Zoning Board in Item 2, and that's an advisory board of citizens, and they're going to review it and see if it matches the Cary Community Plan, which is a citizen-generated plan. And they will make a recommendation to council, and it will come back to council in a few months. Last time I said 4 or 5, and they go, no, probably longer, so I have no idea, but it'll be a few months. So thank you again for attending, and thank you, Ms. Dry. Okay. Where did I lose my red letter? All these screens popped up, and there it is. All right, moving to our fourth public hearing. It's the Act 32 Accessory Dwelling Unit Land Development Ordinance Amendments. And Assistant Town Manager Scott Berry will introduce the item, and Assistant Planning Director Katie Dry will present the staff's report. Council will not take action on these amendments, but it will be referred to our Planning and Zoning Board, and council will look at it and decide on at a future date. Mr. Berry.
Good evening, Council. I'll be really brief, but tonight's Act Amendment, it's going to create the ability for ADUs or accessory dwelling units to be in more places in Cary. And like most things that we do, a lot of people have worked on this, and it's taken a lot of time to get here because a lot of people have worked on this. Besides Katie and her staff, Assistant Town Manager Dana Winmeyer has provided leadership. Heather Wheelahan, our housing director, has been working on this through multiple roles, including in the planning department, so it's been ongoing. We've waited for the state of North Carolina to determine if they were going to pass any rules along about ADUs, and they decided not to, so now we're moving forward. And Council, most importantly, thank you for your leadership and guidance as we continue to get feedback on this ordinance. We look forward to continuing to get feedback on the ordinance from you tonight, and I'll pass it over to Katie to go through the ordinance changes. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And Council, I'm happy to present to you Act 32, which is a proposal to amend Cary's zoning ordinance regarding accessory dwelling units. So before we get started, let's take a moment to review accessory dwelling units and what they are. They are smaller residential dwellings located on the same lot as a primary dwelling. Accessory dwelling units, also called ADUs, must meet the North Carolina Building Code. And very importantly, an ADU does include minimum living facilities, which include cooking, sleeping, bathing, and these all must be included within accessory dwelling units. They also must include a foundation. Accessory dwelling units are also referred to sometimes as backyard bungalows, in-law suites, and carriage houses. Correct? Yeah. So Cary currently allows accessory dwelling units only for limited circumstances based on our current zoning regulations. The Imagine Cary Community Plan adopted in 2017 identified accessory dwelling units as a way to expand housing choices by offering next-generation housing, a provision for more housing choices for all residents, to encourage and support the provision of affordable dwellings. In 2021, Council adopted the Cary Housing Plan, which reinforced the Imagine Cary Community Plan and provided further policy guidance to amend the zoning regulations to expand the potential for ADU development. The plan further noted that this would help with housing supply, affordability, provide provisions for people with disabilities and the caretakers of those. It would provide provisions for seniors and multi-generational households, and for gentle density. Cary's current regulations of accessory dwelling units split accessory dwelling units into two categories. We have accessory dwelling units and utility dwelling units. The primary difference between the two is that utility dwelling units are attached directly to the primary dwelling, while accessory dwelling units are a detached structure, possibly in the rear yard or located over a garage. Cary's ordinance already permits utility dwelling units throughout most of Cary, and while ADUs are only allowed in certain zoning districts. We also should take this time to talk about what is not an ADU. So ADUs do not include manufactured homes, recreational vehicles, or travel trailers. ADUs are subject to the North Carolina State Building Code and must be submitted to residential permitting and going through a permitting process. I also want to note that many times we hear about tiny houses, and these could either fall into a permitted ADU or not, and it really just depends. So for example, if a tiny house is located on wheels and not a permanent foundation, then it cannot be classified as an ADU. However, if the tiny house was put on a permanent foundation, if it was upfitted to meet all of the North Carolina State Building Code requirements, then yes, it could be permitted as an accessory dwelling unit. So that's just something to think about that could fall in either category. Common regulations associated with an ADU include lot size and zoning district, looking at the size of the ADU and setbacks, parking requirements, looking at the number of ADUs, and the height. When we look at North Carolina Building Code, we're looking for life and safety components and fire separation. Prior to the public hearing tonight, Cary staff have sought the input on the proposed amendment from members of the community. Cary staff facilitated a virtual community meeting for the proposed amendment on January 17th of 2024. 90 members of the Cary community participated. Most attendees were supportive of this proposed amendment. Questions and concerns expressed at the meeting were regarding the size and the design allowances, roles of homeowners associations, permitting, an interest in fast-track permitting, short-term rental restrictions, and parking. Staff also presented an overview of the amendment to the Senior Advisory Board on January 10th and July 10th of this year. Board members were supportive of moving the amendment forward. They had questions about accessibility, HOA covenants, permits, whether Cary could pursue pre-approved plans, including some designed for seniors. As the amendment was being developed and brought forward for community feedback, we identified 3 objectives for the amendment. First, to simplify the rules through incremental change, to make ADUs more accessible and feasible, and to balance Cary's values and priorities. And as we started to dive into the regulations, we needed to review the variety of proposed ADUs that could come across our desk to ensure that the regulations could accommodate each of the types that we would see. The proposed amendments are intended to make ADUs more accessible to property owners throughout Cary. The amendment includes the following changes. First, to consolidate the definition of accessory dwelling unit and utility dwelling unit. To allow detached ADUs in more zoning districts in Cary. To increase the allowable size of an ADU relative to the primary dwelling, and to simplify the parking requirements for an ADU. And tonight we're also seeking feedback on the proposed height regulations associated with an ADU. So to summarize the proposed changes, I'll just walk through the current and the proposed changes. So first, our current regulations for the size of an ADU relative to the primary dwelling is that the ADU can be no larger than 33% compared to the primary dwelling. This amendment would increase that to 50%. Currently, the maximum size of an ADU is at 800 square feet. This would remain unchanged. Current zoning districts that allow detached ADUs include R80, R40, R20, some within town center, and also some within PDDs. And there's an asterisk there because there are some additional regulations for each. So this proposed amendment would open it up so that all districts that permit detached dwellings would have the ability to be eligible through zoning for ADUs. Again, we would need to review PDDs to see if there are more restrictive conditions associated with those PDDs. Currently, all ADUs must meet setbacks. There would be no change to this provision. When it comes to parking, ADUs, which again are the detached option, requires 1 space per bedroom, with UDUs, which are the utility dwelling unit within the existing primary dwelling, it requires a total of 4 spaces. So we would simplify the parking to just require 1 space per ADU. Currently, all ADUs must meet building code, and there would be no change to this provision. An area that we are seeking feedback on tonight includes height regulation. The LDO currently allows accessory structures to be built to the maximum height allowed by the current zoning district. For example, the maximum height for a structure in the R20 zoning district is 35 feet. An accessory structure such as a garage could also be built to 35 feet. The proposed amendment, as it's currently written, could change the height allowance for ADUs, so that an ADU could not be taller than the existing principal detached dwelling. Staff has identified pros and cons with this proposed change. So in this example, in the picture that we're looking at here, there's an ADU that's built over the garage in the backyard. And so if this amendment were to move forward with a height regulation to be included, it could potentially make this particular example non-conforming use. So to walk through some of the pros or cons as we think about height regulations, some of the pros would be aesthetics. It's also a way to help maintain existing character within the neighborhoods. Some of the cons could be that the limitations for adding a height restriction could become burdensome for some homeowners who are required to provide the existing height of their home, especially if they do not have architectural plans or a survey of their home. It could also be difficult for staff to track this information and enforce this requirement. And it could limit the potential for constructing a second-story ADU over a garage or a house when the existing house is one story. We also note that the proposed change does not impact other accessory structures, so a homeowner could still construct an accessory structure that is built to the zoning district's height limit, but the ADU could not be taller than the existing home. So as we stated, this is an area where we are seeking feedback. The proposed height limitation is included in this amendment, but it can be altered, can be ultimately removed based on feedback from the public hearing tonight. So going back to the objective of the ADU amendment, which is intended to make ADUs more accessible, we looked at the numbers to measure the amendment's potential impact. This map here shows where ADUs are currently allowed in Cary. There are currently 4,000 properties that are eligible for detached ADUs. And as a reminder, as I previously stated, utility dwelling units, these are the type of units that are attached to the principal structure. These are already permitted in most zoning districts within Cary. So this map that we're looking at is focusing on the detached units. So based on our GIS data, the proposed amendment would enable a total of 42,000 properties to be eligible for detached ADUs, which is an increase of 38,000 additional properties from the current regulations. We do want to note, however, that the individual properties may be subject to HOA covenants that would be outside of Cary's current zoning regulations. We also looked into that, and we note that of the 42,000 properties, potentially 32,000 are subject to HOA covenant regulations, and so a homeowner would need to just double check with their HOA to see if there's any additional restrictions that are above and beyond zoning regulations. So this concludes our overview of the Act 32 amendments. Following the public hearing, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Try. Now it's time for the public hearing for Act 32 accessory dwelling units, and I'll call on the clerk for any written comments or any registered speakers.
We had one written comment and 2 registered speakers. Jeff and Lindy Morris expressed strong support for this amendment. They highlight the importance of this additional ADU options for their autistic son's future living arrangement and appreciate the town's efforts to make this possible. Our first registered speaker is Fillmore Bowen.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you this evening. My name is Fillmore Bowen. I have been a resident of Cary for 39 years. I have watched Cary grow a lot, and so this is an interesting discussion for me. I'm also a volunteer and legislative advocate for the AARP of North Carolina. On behalf of the AARP and our members, I applaud the efforts of the town of Cary to expand housing options by easing barriers to zoning and use of accessory dwelling units. The AARP supports the availability of ADUs as an affordable, accessible housing option for people of all ages. AARP's 2021 Home and Community Preference Survey indicated that nearly 60% of adults would consider living in an ADU, and nearly 3/4 of those polled said they would create an ADU as a place for a caregiver to stay to take care of their older relatives. The survey also indicated that more than 80% of respondents would consider building an ADU for their loved ones, relatives, and/or friends, therefore emphasizing the multifaceted use of an ADU. ADUs allow homeowners to choose where they age, while also providing a path to easing North Carolina's severe housing shortage. The AARP is pleased that the town of Cary's ADU ordinance amendment is before you tonight and will hopefully reduce barriers to ADUs if it gets passed. With the number of Americans over the age of 65 expected to more than double from 40 million to 81 million by 2040, it is paramount that policymakers, such as the Cary Town Council, work to maintain and create housing options and communities that meet the needs of older adults and facilitate aging in place. I would like to thank the council for providing me the opportunity to talk about the importance of ADUs as a viable housing option and how it will provide Cary with affordable and accessible housing, particularly for older adults looking for the opportunity to stay in their homes and for this to be an active adult community going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second registered speaker is Jeff Benavides.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's Jeff Benavides. I'm at 2009 Talloway in District D. I just wanted to come and speak on support of this amendment to the zoning code. Also wanted to applaud the specific recommendations on increasing the sizes as well as reducing the parking restrictions. And so thank you for the work on that. On a more personal note, I am currently looking to do this on my own property, and I'm going to use it as a granny flat, I hope. So I hope to be one of the first applicants in this new upgraded. I will say one procedural just recommendation, possibly for staff to consider and for you to consider as well, is for existing structures. I currently bought my home about 2 years ago, and the existing structure was built in 1994, so that was done way before me. I'm looking to make those modifications on existing structures. A lot of the presentation and considerations is for new construction considerations, so I just wanted to make a procedural recommendation to have some separate rules or whatever, as long as it meets the goals of the ordinance. So that was all that I had, and just wanted to say thank you for your service, and thanks for your commitment to sustainability and resilience.
Thank you. Any other registered speakers?
No additional registered.
You're here in the audience and would like to speak at this public hearing. Now's your opportunity. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? Seeing no one, will close the public hearing. And I only had one question. Let's see how I'd phrase this. HOAs supersede town code on this, but if the HOA doesn't specifically state ADUs are prohibited, then it's allowed?
Probably.
That was legalese, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, each, and when we know there are many neighborhoods in Cary, obviously with covenants, each neighborhood's covenants are different from the next neighborhood. And so it's a matter of interpreting the covenants. And so that would be, the HOA interpretation of their covenants, could vary. So it's really hard. It's hard to make a blanket statement about it.
Okay. Other comments, questions?
I have a couple, but we never go right.
Okay, let's go right.
So
What about it?
I would let you go first on this one.
I'll go before
You go, girl. Okay.
Can you clarify parking for ADUs versus UDUs. I'm not sure if I understand if UDUs are also going to one, or like the proposed versus what's current.
Yes, so our goal is to make it simpler. So let me pull up the chart. So you can see under the current regulations, there are one set of requirements for ADUs, which again are the detached structures, and UDUs, which are basically a dwelling unit within the house. And our goal would be to simplify it and just require one space per ADU, whether it's inside the structure or a separate detached unit. We would just have one space.
Why only 800 square feet? Where are we getting that number from?
Yeah, so we did conduct research on, generally what industry standards were with sizes with ADUs. Currently, like I said, our regulations are 800 square feet. When we surveyed other jurisdictions of the area, generally the maximum was around 800 square feet. Some jurisdictions do allow a little bit larger than that if you have maybe a larger lot, an acre or more. So there can be some like tiers where it's built in to be a little bit larger. So as a starting place, we did just propose to stick at 800 square feet, but we're again seeking your feedback and could continue to look into additional options.
I think that's an interesting question, because when I was looking at ADUs, the average size of an ADU is anywhere from 600 to 1,200 square feet. And the limitation in Raleigh is 50% of the square footage. But in Wilmington, it's a max of 1,200 square feet. In Charlotte, it's a max of 800 square feet. In Asheville, it's a different one. So I'm wondering, did you get feedback during the citizen engagement phase that said 800's great, or I wish it were more? Because I know we have some ADUs in downtown that I see and I know of and have been in. What does that look like on the ground?
Yeah, so when it comes to the feedback, a lot of the feedback that we received during the public engagement was around different issues such as parking, Airbnbs, HOA regulations. There was some feedback around the size ratio. It seems as though that's where most people are running into issues, not that maximum square footage. People are running into issues with that 33% that we currently have in place. So that's where we heard a lot of that targeted feedback when it comes to the size.
So 800, you chose 800 from what, going back to Councilmember Craig's question, from what basis of data? Is it the predominant number out in the field?
It appears to be the predominant number. And as I noted, when we were looking at other jurisdictions, so Raleigh, for example, the max is 800 square feet. If you have a lot that's 40,000 square feet or larger, you can go up a little bit larger. So they do have kind of a tier system. And Asheville is another one where it's 800 square feet. It can be larger in other situations. So 800 does appear to be kind of the industry standard, but we could build in some flexibility and variability like those examples we shared.
Yeah, I'd just be interested in what the feedback is, because I know I've been in a couple that are downtown that here's another difference. We used to count unheated square footage in the ADU, but that's also another change here, right?
That's correct, yes.
So some of the ones I've been in that are like a garage, like an apartment over a garage, we used to count in the square footage the unheated garage space, is that correct? And we're no longer doing that?
Yes, with the current language is proposed to count the heated square footage.
So 800 might be better, but that was the complaint I got from several citizens, was that their previous one was, we counted the unheated, and that's why it went 800 wasn't enough.
I'll just add, one thing that I've observed looking at condos is that condos are, like one-bedroom condos are often in that 800 range, whereas if you want 2 bedrooms, it gets like the 1,000 and above. So maybe, an ADU is meant to be like, supplementary is not supposed to be a 2 or 3 bedroom house, right? It's the idea is kind of like, hey, it's a space for, like you would imagine, one bedroom. So
Well, a
that's-
studio apartment is 750 square feet. A one-bedroom, the average size of a one-bedroom in Cary is almost 1,000 square feet. The
That's a
average size.
large. That's a large.
That's a
one
one-bed, that's with a
Yeah,
one-bedroom,
yeah,
not a
I'm telling
studio.
you, that's a large one bedroom.
Yeah.
I've been looking at
Not a-
condos in Raleigh.
I
and-
think for
Yeah,
the
the
new
studio is
projects,
They're
750.
not, yeah.
for the new projects, what we have approved so far, 550 square foot was the size of the studio apartments.
No,
It is
there aren't,
proposed.
750, not 550.
Can we check? I'm pretty sure it was 550 for one of the projects.
It's
It
750.
was my idea. It was
It's somewhere between 5 and 800.
It's 750, yeah.
Well,
Everyone wins.
I hear what everybody's saying, though, but if we have the 50% of the relative to the size of the primary dwelling, I don't think it hurts anything for us to go up a little bit. It would still be to scale at that 50%. So if you have a larger house, and then you put the ADU on there, maybe you can put me and my friend Amy both in the same ADU, right? And just have that just a little bit bigger, but still relative to the size. Because at a certain point, we're putting two houses on a lot,
Unless
right?
it overwhelms the lot.
Right.
Right.
Which
this
may mean it
doesn't
may matter
take
what
into
the,
consideration.
how large the lot is.
Yeah.
I think
Right,
that's
that's why I
what
think the
Katie was
Raleigh
saying, that, Raleigh
Based on
has
size of lot.
specifications for the lot size, and based on that, like, they could decide the size of the ADU. And that
Yeah.
might be a,
And we can certainly build that in moving forward as an option.
I think also too, based on the data, is if we're trying something new that's very substantive, is if we made it 1,000, people are going to do 1,000. If we made it 1,100, people are going to do 1,100. And just being more conservative at the 800, but there's nothing magic
But you have
about
to look
it.
at setbacks, and if you have a 2,500 square
yeah.
foot home, then
Yeah.
a 1,000 square foot ADU might be a
But you
perfect-
also would
right.
like, I know, we would like it, the staff is so good at working with applicants that if actually 900 works great, build in some sort of flexibility to get to there, but have it kind of somehow be based somewhere around 800 at least as we start to get some applications in.
I appreciate
Ish,
the idea
yeah.
of going slowly,
Yeah.
right? The stepping, let's try this and move forward. I definitely like the idea of only requiring one parking space compared to the UDU of 4 parking spaces for that. Those are things that I really like about it. I think that, seeing this ordinance come back to us after the approval of the housing plan in 2021, having these changes allows for a gentle density increase and a variety of housing stock that adds to our urban tapestry. So I think, as Mr. Bowen said, it adds some opportunity and choices for people who want to age in place, which is an important part. I would like to see, the picture that you showed with the apartment over the garage is an interesting picture of what could be, but in our ordinance, that would be non-conforming, right? So I like the idea of using the maximum height that's allowed, not necessarily limiting the height of the ADU to the same height as the house, because it limits something which I felt, looking at it, looked absolutely normal. So that's the only one that I would love to see, to hear what the rest of the council thinks about that, because that one looked to me like it'd be something that I'd rather use the maximum height rather than just saying, oh, it shouldn't be any taller than the current house.
So I would be more flexible about enlarging the size of the unit with acreage, with the size of the yard, than I would be going above the primary dwelling unit with height. Because I live very close to a house that added on a UDO, and they added it so high, it overwhelms the original dwelling. It looks funky, like when you see it. I'm not talking about the house that was next door to me. I see you smiling. It's not the one that was next door to me. It's a different one.
Not our friend's
Not our
house.
friend's house.
Okay.
But a
In
different
case
one.
they're watching, it's
Yeah,
not
in
their
case
house.
they're watching. I'm not talking about your house. But it does look funky. I mean,
Yeah.
and so I would put those aesthetics as an importance, because if you start hurting the aesthetics of the neighborhood, then you're going to start having people who have an outcry and they become opposed to ADUs. And so I think as long as you can kind of keep it feeling like it works in the community, it's fine. So, but I'd be more open to allowing larger units as long as the size of the yard can support it.
Well, further to that, so you live in probably a far more uniform neighborhood than I do, right? So there's that, where you live in a neighborhood where there's really 4 or 5 types of houses and everything's fairly uniform. All of a sudden, everybody's got a single-story house and there's a 2-story ADU, may look really strange. I live downtown. They just built a very tall house right next door to me.
Our other friends.
Our other friends, yeah.
Right? Very tall house. And at first I was like, oh, this is going to ruin my life. But it didn't. It's fine. It's like whatever. It's totally fine, right? So if they were to have, put they have a garage that's right next to me. If they'd put a ADU above it, it'd be fine. Because everything in my neighborhood is irregular. So you don't have that uniformity. And I think that's where the application here is. Most of the uniform neighborhoods are going to be in an HOA.
Right.
And the neighborhoods like mine, and Michelle, I don't know if you have a HOA in your neighborhood, right? And where we don't have HOAs, so we already have a fair amount of irregularity in our neighborhoods. So that's how I'm looking at it, right? So if an HOA was going to consider allowing them there, could they not restrict the height in their covenants?
They could potentially, yeah, if it's built into the covenant.
Yeah, so that's sort of how I see that part. It doesn't restrict my ability, because I'm, 2-story, 1-story, 1-story, 2-story, like it's like that. So it wouldn't restrict our, the older neighborhoods.
I think it's more likely that you would have an HOA that would either be silent on ADUs or prohibit them. It seems highly unlikely that you'd have an ADU that would, an HOA that would, covenant that would think ahead and say, and if you do an ADU, we're going to restrict the height of it to no more than the size of the house. That seems like a stretch to me. So I think when we do this, we have to take into consideration that there are probably some HOAs that have no mention of an ADU in the covenant, and that they could happen. And we want to just make sure that as we move forward, we're not pissing people off.
That makes sense.
Other comments?
I just have one question about the parking. I noticed that there's one spot, there's a change to one spot, and in places, so talking about my district, the people have driveways and we have roads, and so where is this car going to get parked? On the driveway, is it allowed, or is it allowed on the street?
Yeah, we would be looking to ensure that this additional parking spot can be accommodated within the driveway. So during our review of ADUs, we do look at the driveway, and we have the applicant kind of dimension out where the vehicles could park, so we would be ensuring that it could fit within that area.
How about downtown?
Similar situation, yes.
Okay.
Well,
And
we don't have parking restrictions downtown.
Yeah.
Correct? We don't have parking restrictions.
Yeah, so during the permit review, we would ensure that we could dimension it within the driveway, but ultimately, if they choose to park elsewhere, that's certainly their choice.
assuming that every house in downtown has a driveway, I would
No.
think.
No.
So would that be a problem?
That would be a challenge, yeah. If you do not have a driveway that could accommodate this minimum parking requirement, that could be a limiting factor.
I will say, just because I'm a urban lover, parking in a lot of subdivisions, parking on the street, even in Preston, when I lived in Preston Village, was not allowed by the HOA covenants. Right? You were not allowed to park overnight on the street. However, in downtown, parking on the street is actually preferred because it slows traffic. And so you will find, at least in many downtowns, many of us on Ridgecrest, as an example, we like it when people park on Ridgecrest on the street because it slows traffic. So where you stand is based on where you sit. If you sit in a neighborhood where people don't park on the street and it's preferred, then I can see exactly what you mean. It's like, I don't want people parking on the street.
No,
But
that's not
depending-
what I. That's
Oh,
not
is that
what I
not what you
mean.
meant?
What I'm trying to understand is, will that stop the town from approving the request for ADUs if there is no parking spot on the in the garage or
Oh, if there's
driveway?
already not.
Sounds like that's one of the requirements, so that's going to impact the approval
I see.
of the ADU in downtown, where this is highly desired, I would think.
Yeah,
Right, right, right.
As is currently written, yes, that would be a limiting factor.
Can you
but
do an
again,
asterisk where otherwise not required
Yeah.
by LDO?
That's something that we can
Could this be
certainly-
a zoning thing that, in downtown could be a special zoning versus other areas?
Certainly.
I'm just kind of brainstorming, so.
Certainly.
Downtown.
But this would require the ADU to have a parking
Right.
space.
Okay, because we don't have parking requirements for multifamily, for commercial in downtown.
Right, depending on the
Or
zoning
residential,
district that
do
you're
we?
in. Yeah,
For-
depending.
So we
on
would
the zoning.
only have a parking requirement for an ADU?
That would be something we would have to look
Yeah,
at. Under
that
the
doesn't
current
sound right.
ordinance.
Well, I think a part of, I mean, staff doesn't have an official position on this. That's a really, you kind of have to struggle with it because there's pros and cons to both.
Yeah.
Is on-street parking slows down traffic. It also makes it difficult to pick up trash and other
Yeah.
town services. That's the other side of it. And it, when the neighborhoods were originally conceived and designed, whether it's Preston or anyone else, is that, the road network and everything was planned together. Anticipate, how much space there is, the spacing, and adding a lot of ADUs. I'm one that's not bothered by a lot of on-street parking, but a lot of people are. And so, Councilmember Bush really kind of captured it. We think the lack of a parking requirement is one where that could start to really divide some of these areas into being very pro ADU and very down on ADU. So having it be one space, correct me if I'm wrong, Katie, is kind of a way of trying to soften that level of intensity. But at the same time, it's also going to limit it to some degree. So it's just a tough one, but we don't have a strong position on it one way or the other. Larger communities, more urban communities, they've kind of, the parking challenges just kind of come with the deal, and they have for decades. It's a new issue for Cary within the neighborhoods, not having adequate parking. We're starting to see some of that given on some of the, the Airbnb issue, some of the other, that these are primarily single-family neighborhoods, always conceived that way, and now the dynamics have changed, multi-generations living in certain places. So we are seeing those dynamics, and they really do sometimes divide blocks and opinions. We do get a decent number of complaints about things that are unlawful, and a lot of it's on-street parking.
Well, you brought up an interesting one. I did get an email about this, asking if there was anything we could do to ensure that the ADUs built aren't for Airbnbs.
No?
That's what I wanted to make sure. That's what the answer is that right?
Right, yes, correct. Cary has no Airbnb regulations at this point, so that would be a separate amendment we need to talk about if you're interested in that.
Another item that would be in the kind of the pro ADU is one thing that worry about a lot with the aging, Cary's demographics aging, the very small supply of ranch-style homes.
I know.
And this, we've had even talks, and staff is like, how are we going to live in our houses when we can't get up and down the stairs? Well, an ADU is part of the option to that, on having some more livable first-floor space.
Yeah.
And plus for teachers, because they can have the yard and, they can live closer to
Yeah.
the school and they can still be in the neighborhoods, where they want to live in. So I think this is good.
I lower the divorce rate. I mean, I know, I don't have to go in the house anymore if I have an ADU. Great.
They could put, we talked about tiny homes, and they could put, not a mobile home or a manufactured home, but they could put a modular home, right? It doesn't have to be a stick-built home.
Yes.
It just has to be on a slab.
Foundation.
Yeah, it could be a modular. If it's built so that it meets North Carolina State Building Code, then that's certainly an option too. And of course, it would have to be on a foundation as well. Yes.
You could just 3D print one.
I could.
Can I share, I just wanted to share some feedback I got from the Western Region Affordable Housing Action and Advocacy Committee. They overwhelmingly expressed their support for this, and they're really glad to see this And Jean Ford in particular, she reached out to me, and she said something interesting, which I think is outside of the scope of this. But one thing they advocate for, and Jean in particular, Mrs. Ford, advocates for, is that we consider allowing churches and possibly nonprofits to build ADUs on their property by right. And I know that this is not necessarily the time and place for that, but I just wanted to put that out there because I thought it was an interesting idea, and I read about it a little bit. And it seems like an application of the ADU approach that isn't typically terribly problematic in a lot of communities. Church properties and sometimes nonprofits have a lot of land typically, and I know we've got some of our local church communities and faith communities that have come to us with some ideas about building affordable housing on their properties, and this might be something for us to consider in the future. They're a really knowledgeable group, and they know what they're talking about. So I thought it was just an interesting thing I wanted to share.
Well, thanks, Council. This is good discussion, good information. And if we're ready to move along, this will go to the Planning and Zoning Board next for their review and recommendation, and we'll see it again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dry. We'll move to our 5th public hearing, proposed change in the method of election, and our town attorney, Lisa Glover, will present the item.
Thank you. As you know, on April 25th, you directed staff to begin the process to change the method of election, and tonight is the second step in a 3-step process to do that. Quick reminder, there are 4 types of municipal elections in North Carolina. Cary has used the election and runoff method for about 24 years, but we're one of only 10 cities in North Carolina that continue to use that method. And all of our other county municipality friends use the plurality method of election, at which the top vote getter in the November election wins the seat. So changing Cary's election method to the plurality method should result in significant cost savings, and as we've talked about, may also lessen voter confusion as to the date of an election. So here's the timeline and the process for making the change, and this is all outlined in state law. At your last meeting, you adopted a resolution of intent to change the election method. We advertised this public hearing, and tonight you will hold a public hearing on the change. You are not permitted to decide tonight on whether to move forward. State law makes you wait till another meeting to do that. So we have that scheduled for August 22nd. And at that point, you would adopt an ordinance. And it would be final at that point unless you decide to call for a referendum or citizens would petition for a referendum. Those are options. Ideally, then, this change would be effective for November 4th, 2025, the next council elections. I do want to point out, I did receive a call from one member of the Wake County Board of Elections just sharing his concern that if a citizen petition for a referendum were to be successful, it might not be able to make it onto the ballot for this November's election, as they have to get ballots ready and printed, sooner. The state law sets out a process and a timeline, and the state law timeline doesn't match the Board of Elections timeline. So, so that's just a note of caution from him if a citizen petition were to be received. But otherwise, adopting the ordinance August 22nd, and then should be effective for the 2025 election. So that's the end of the presentation. After the public hearing, if you have any questions, just let me know.
Thank you, Ms. Glover. Now's the time for the public hearing for the proposed change in method of election, and I'll call on our clerk to see if there are any written comments or any registered speakers.
No written comments and no registered speakers.
If you're in the audience and you would like to speak at this public hearing, now's your opportunity. Anyone to speak at this public hearing? See no one, I'll close the public hearing, open it up to council for questions or comments before we see it again. I think we've discussed this one at length.
Yes, we too many times.
We sure have.
All right, thank you. We'll move to our last, public hearing, which is the proposed bond referendum public hearing, and Debt and Investment Manager Marcelo Arlate will present the item, and council may take action.
Marcelo, take your time.
Nice and slow. 45 minutes.
Go slow. Nice.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's great to be before you once again. Tonight's action by Council for the proposed 2024 bond referendum will be the next step as we implement the Imagine Cary Community Plan. This exciting step continues the comprehensive plan for Cary, which sets out the long-term vision, policies, and strategic actions over the next 15 to 20 years. On May 2nd, Council voted unanimously to proceed with the proposed bond referendum for $590 million of capital projects. And last month, Council took the first two legal steps by adopting the preliminary findings resolution on June 10th, and then introducing the bond orders and adopting the sworn statement on June 27th. And tonight, Council will take the third and final step towards the proposed on November 5th of this year, as you hold the public hearing and adopt the resolution calling for the proposed referendum. Many have already seen this table before, and we have included it here so that those who may not have seen this before can see how the total bond funding is broken down by ballot measures and projects. You will recall we discussed during last council's meeting the change to the ballot language here in North Carolina. For any referenda held after January 1st, 2024, the new law requires local governments to disclose on a voter's ballot the estimated total cost of the bonds for each ballot measure, as well as the property tax liability to cover that cumulative cost. This table summarizes the majority of the changes included in the ballot language that you have before you for adoption this evening. The LGC interest rate used for the calculation of the interest expense was provided as guidance for North Carolina issuers by the Local Government Commission. In reality, the rate Cary may achieve may be much lower, but these are the rates the state has called for to be included in the ballot language. You will also see that there are two different interest rates for the two proposed ballot questions, and that is due to the different types of bonds we anticipate will be utilized for the different proposed ballot questions. The ballot language includes the bond amount, the interest rate provided by the Local Government Commission, what the interest cost calculates to, and then the total expense for the bonds. This slide compares the length of the proposed 2024 ballot language to the 2019 referendum ballot question.
That's amazing.
The 2024 ballot language is longer and more detailed than the 2019 language due to the additional detail now required following the revisions put in place by the North Carolina General Assembly. Tonight, Mayor and Council, you have before you the third and final legal step in advance of Election Day on November 5th. Should you proceed with tonight's actions, the next time the proposed bond referendum will be on the agenda will be in December, when the results of the referendum will be presented. In closing, staff first recommends you adopt the orders for the housing and parks and recreation bonds. Following that, we ask that you direct the town clerk to publish the bond orders, and finally, adopt the resolution calling for a bond referendum. This ends the presentation, and following the public hearing, we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Now's the time for the public hearing for order authorization, $30 million housing bonds, and order authorization, $560 million parks and recreation facilities bonds. The town council will hear anyone who might wish to be heard on the questions of validity of the orders or the advisability of the issues of the bonds. So I'll call on the clerk for any written comments or call on any registered speakers.
No written comments, no registered speakers.
If you're in the audience and would like to speak at this public hearing, now's your opportunity. I'm sorry, what? Oh, if you're in the audience and would like to speak at the public hearing, now's your opportunity. Seeing no one, will close the public hearing, open it up to council members for questions, comments, and we have motions, and you have handouts for those motions when we're ready.
I have one comment. As we go forward in publishing what the bonds would be spent on, I would recommend that we refer to the Ernest Jones Park Master Plan instead as the Nature Park Master Plan, in the same way that you have Asian Garden Master Plan, because it's clear to people, nobody really knows what Ernest Jones Park is.
Good point.
Yeah. So they're like, I don't know, I don't care about that, but if you say Nature Park, it might be more explicit.
Good point.
And we can do that, right? It's not too late.
No, that's our educational materials. It's not anything that goes on the ballot,
Okay.
so, yes.
all that's on the ballot is the actual bond amount, that question, and then.
The
all
interest and the tax,
And the
yes.
taxes, okay. And the tax implications, right? So it will express what the,
Proposed tax impact would be per 100,000 of your tax value. So that,
per that very high estimated
correct,
interest rate.
per that
Yes.
LGC interest rate.
Okay.
Can you go back to the list of projects
Of course.
that we were referring to? There. Okay. I was looking at the PDF. The PDF didn't have the gray to show, it just had the listing, so that's great. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Other comments or questions? Are we ready for a motion or two?
I can put the motion.
Okay.
Motion for 5.6, proposed bonds referendum public hearing. I move to adopt the order authorizing $30 million housing bonds, adopt the order authorizing $560 million parks and recreational facilities bond, direct the town clerk to publish the bond orders, and adopt the resolution calling a bond referendum.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
A second?
There's a second. And it's okay to take them all at once, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, council.
That is our last public hearing. We have no discussion items. We had a closed session earlier today, so we have no further business. Meeting adjourned.